Welcome everybody. Just a quick reminder that anything you see on this channel is advice and done in a purely entertainment capacity only. I'm just a guy working on his stuff that breaks in his front yard. That's it. There are no warranties implied or given. This is just me working on junk, passing on what I've learned. End disclaimer. Good afternoon, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this video, we're going to tackle a couple of different things, but the main focus of the video is to do a timing chain job on my 2001 Ford F-250 with the 5.4 liter V8 behind me here. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay guys, before we touch anything, let's cover what we're going to need for this job. At a minimum, you really need the following things. You're going to need a crank alignment tool. You'll see its use later. It's something specific to Fords, I think even to the modular engine family. You will need camshaft locks. That's what these are. You're going to need 2 of them. You can also do this with a vice grip, but this prevents you from marring things up. You are also going to need a timing kit. The timing kit is going to include tensioners. This particular style is the mechanical ratcheting, so there is no gasket back here. To me, this is superior to what's actually in the truck right now. You're going to need a new cam sprocket. You're going to need your guides, which is what all these are. There's guides for the top, guides for the bottom. So, and of course you need a new chain. You are also going to need timing cover gasket kit, which is what this is. And you're going to need a valve cover gasket kit. This is with the assumption that you've not had any of this apart recently and you don't have fresh gaskets on stuff. Now, you don't necessarily need this. You can get by without it, but it gives me a feel good because I've never done this before. We're going to be learning together. Again, same with this. You can do vice grips, but I wanted this. Just works out better in my opinion. Let's talk about the actual part numbers, because your parts and your quality matters. So this is a Felpro TCS 45982-1. That's your timing cover. For valve cover gaskets, we have Felpro VS 50481R. For your timing kit, see if it's on the box here. It's a Melling kit. I'm just not sure. There it is. It's a Melling 3-391S, and I strongly recommend that either you buy Motorcraft or Melling when you do this job, because the quality of the parts absolutely matters. If this blows up on you, your engine will destroy itself because you're doing a timing job. I'll go into that in a second. So I strongly recommend this kit. This is what's called the professional grade kit. There is an economy kit with a different number, and it has slightly inferior parts in it. So choose wisely. Now what I'm also going to do, because my truck has 277,000 miles on it, is I am replacing the oil pump because it's right there. And there is a way to do it without dropping the oil pan. So you don't need to worry about a pan gasket and everything. I purchased the high volume pump, which for a 5.4 liter 2 valve is a M176 HV. One very important thing to note is that this timing kit and this oil pump are specific to a 5.4 liter 2 valve engine. you have a slightly different timing kit and a slightly different standard pump and high volume pump for a Ford 3-valve engine and a Ford 5.4 liter 4-valve engine. Be very, very precise when you order the kit. It will matter. Now let's talk very quickly about why it's so important we do this right. All right, so buried behind all those accessory pulleys, there is a cover, and behind that cover is your timing chain. What does it do? It links your camshafts, which in this engine, one camshaft is located in this valve cover, and the other camshaft is located behind this valve cover, and it ties those camshafts together with the crankshaft, which that pulley there at the very, very bottom, the crankshaft's behind that. And the timing chain, as the name implies, makes sure that as the crank and the cam turn, that they don't hit each other. Okay? This is important because if I remember correctly, it's the cams turn twice for every one revolution of the crank. So you have to time it. Otherwise, you wind up with valves and pistons hitting each other and your engine goes boom. It's not a good thing. Now, there are some engines out there that are called non-interference engines, and in those engines, if you have a timing failure, you're fine because stuff won't hit each other. There's enough clearance between all the parts that nothing hits and you're fine. But to meet fuel economy standards and performance standards, more and more and more and more engines have become interference engines where things will absolutely smack against each other if you get it wrong. So as we move forward in this, you need to very, very, very much follow along with me, follow the steps precisely, and if we do it right, we'll come through the end of this looking like champs, and we're going to have a solid engine. And I'll be perfectly candid and upfront. I'm going to link his video, but I'm essentially following the video that Ford Tech Makuloco put out. He's a professional Ford Tech, owns a shop. He shows you how to do it as per Ford standard. That's what I'm following. Again, I'll link it in the description if you prefer his explanation versus little old me. All right, all the blabbering out of the way, we're going to go ahead and really dig into this. You might be wondering, well, do I need to do a timing job? Okay, well, number one, do you have a high mileage engine? Okay. Number two, when you start your car on a cold morning, do you hear something that sounds like the intro clip? It might be that you just have a sticky lash adjuster, which is essentially what a lifter is in this engine. Or it could be the lifter's getting starved for oil because you're leaking oil at your tensioner. And let me show you. I'll explain this a little more once we get there, but essentially the tensioners that are in the truck right now, they have a gasket that goes around back here. And they rely on oil pressure to tension. There's a metal rod, see, that pushes on the chain to keep it at the correct tension for it to do its job. Now these are mechanically tensioned, so if I pull that pin out, this rod's gonna go spoing, and that's all she wrote, so don't pull the pin. But if you were to buy the original Ford tensioner, there's a gasket that goes around here because, like I said, it runs on oil pressure, and that gasket absolutely fails. And once it fails, your lifter essentially has to pump, or your tensioner has to pump back up in order to hold tension on your chain. So the blowout's bad enough, you may be hemorrhaging oil there, which means oil's not getting to other parts of the engine that need it, so it's not getting enough lubrication, so things are starting to rattle. And if it's really bad, it leads to the next noise, which is a dead fire indication. You need to get on this, is you hear a chain rattle when you first fire it up in the morning. You hear a which I got yesterday. So if you got chain rattle, If you're hearing that of like a sticky lifter, if you're hearing other kind of weird noises along those lines and a fresh oil change doesn't take care of it, might be time to start thinking about timing. Okay, I promise, that's all the blabbing. We're done with the blabbing for now. We're actually gonna do work. First thing we gotta do, drain the oil. Okay, so in my application, I think I still have the original drain bolt. That is a 16 millimeter. Oh, it doesn't want to go. I don't have room to swing it. There we go. All right, now let's see. Before I forget, do make sure that you've got everything prepped on your pan, like your bleeder's popped and you actually uncorked it. Don't be like me and forget to do those things and then, you know, have a nasty surprise afterwards. All right. Now, you may think, well, you know, I can just reuse this oil, and that's your call, but if your timing chain's gotten pretty bad, you may have bits of plastic and metal shavings floating around in your oil because your timing chain is slapping around willy-nilly against everything, trying to break stuff. So this oil is going out. It's going out anyway because I thought I had a sticky lifter. So I put seafoam in the oil to, you know, try to clean gunk out. That's why this oil is so black. But that's not the problem. It's the timing chain. So, yeah. Anyway, get this all drained out. And I'll go ahead and change the filter. I'm not going to film that. That's pretty silly. But we'll take care of all that. And then we'll move on to the next thing on my list, which is to drain the coolant. You might be asking yourself, well, do I need to drain the coolant? And the answer there is maybe. I don't want to have to work around this coolant bottle. I would rather just remove it and set it aside instead of trying to work around it. And if I'm going to do that, I got to drain it. But the other reason for me is I've owned this truck a couple years now. I've never actually drained the coolant. So it's probably time to, because I got this thing used and I don't know how long it had been since the previous owner drained it. So, you know, probably time to do that. Any case, we need to go, there's two places we need to drain. For your purposes, all you're going to need to do is drain at the radiator petcock. And the petcock is, I want to say it's hanging out over here. Yep, there it is. It's that guy there. Okay, so this one's a little bit different than on my 97.54. That one is actually like has turn handles on it. This one, it does not. We just have a knob. But same deal. You need to turn it loose ways. Oh. Alright, I'm going to get different kind of pliers because this is tight, which doesn't surprise me. It's probably not been opened in an age. Might want to spray some penetrating lube into this. And actually, I can probably put a socket on that. So before I destroy this plastic, let me figure out what socket size that is. Okay, turns out this is a 19 millimeter. Oh, that's way more better. Yeah, it turns out when you use the right tools, things are just way more better. All right. Nope. I'm gonna have to crank on it some more. Oh. Come on. Reveal to me your coolant, as nasty and foul as it shall be. All right, so at this point, really should be starting to see fluid. Wow, that's nasty. Okay. So there we go. If you want this to flow faster, pop your radiator degas bottle up top. Take the cap off, it'll flow faster. I'm gonna get my pan positioned correctly before I do that. This is gonna be used coolant, right? So make sure you dispose of it responsibly. I know some places that's hard to do, but please don't go dump it in the woods. You know, we drink from that water. Particularly me, I have a well. Anyway, we're gonna let this drain. It's gonna take a while, and once the draining process is done, I'll bring you back when I move to go do the block drain. Alrighty, folks. See that, that Allen head, that hex head right there? That is your one and only block drain. There is not one on the driver's side, at least on a 97.54. There is not one on the driver's side. I'll put it that way. And this is supposed to be, I'm gonna guess an SAE size, because it's like a 7.5 millimeter is what it feels like. I don't have that, so what I'm going with is a T50, which fits in here pretty nicely and snug. And I can tell you from working on a 97.54, this is definitely one of those you want to hit it with an impact driver, because if you're sitting there and you're trying to lever on it like with a ratchet, you're gonna strip it out, because that's what I did. I got it out once, went to do it again, started feeling it, didn't want to go, so I left it alone. I'm gonna hit this with some penetrating oil first, use some Croil, probably throw some heat on it to help break it loose, since this has probably never been out in the entire life of this truck. And then we're gonna see if we can get it out. Well, I tried. I threw heat on it, I threw penetrating oil on it. It just stripped out. So that block drain will forever be plugged. If you ever wanted to get that out, you'd have to drill it out. You know, get a drill bit, get on it, drill until you can basically core it, and then get in there with like a grinder, not disc, but like a cylinder or something like that, and grind through it until you actually break it. And once you break it, it'll come right out. Or if you just bore the hole in it, you might be able to collapse it. Maybe, if you make a big enough hole. I don't know why Ford went with a hex head. I've got an 89 F-350, and what they did on that block is there's an actual honest to God bolt that you can put a ratchet on, and you just ratchet it out, and it's so much better. In case you're curious, this is it's NPT threading. I want to say it's 1/4, might be a little bigger than that, but it's NPT, it's not metric, it's not SAE, so keep that in mind if you are going to wreck this. But I am not touching it anymore, because I do not wish to create more work than I can possibly handle. And now we're going to go topside and start taking stuff apart. All right, first things first, coolant bottle's got to come out. So we have a bolt here. I think it's an 8 millimeter. 2 more down here. That'll get it loose. We're also going to need to take some hoses off of it. But to do that, we've got to get this tire iron piece out of the way. And normally there's supposed to be like a wing nut here. Mine is long gone, so I have another 8 millimeter there I need to take out. But this comes out of the way, and since this is now empty, it can come out of the way. We have to take the fan and the fan shroud off. We're going to probably need to take the air box off just for funsies. And looking at everything going on down here, we got some hoses to move and whatnot. We may have some wire harness to move, but I think we can avoid doing any major surgery up here. So let's see. All right. Now, you may be wondering, well, why do you do everything by hand? And I think I've answered this in a video before, but I do everything by hand because unless it's something I've taken apart before, the odds are it's going to fight me. And automatic tools will have a nasty habit of just snapping it clean off, whereas if you work at it by hand, you can get a feel on it and decide if you need to put penetrating oil in it or decide what course you want to take. That is a very small bolt to do what you're going to do. So that's why I do things by hand. If it was something much newer, I'd probably bust loose with the power tools. Oh, earthquake. Not really, but earthquakes do happen in Florida. Just not often. So just kind of twist this off, right? There we go. That looked terrible. All right. So let me go grab an extension and we'll take care of those other two. All right. Yeah, that was a little tight. Don't think I've ever had that one out. Particularly these little guys, they'll get rusted up and then they snap. And then you're pretty annoyed because you snapped your bolt. Yeah, this one. If this was something that I couldn't easily access, I'd probably take the time to... Ooh. The drama. Take the time to clean up the threads. I may still do that because that'll make it go back in a lot easier than it's coming out right now. This is kind of ridiculous. For you guys who live up north, I feel really bad for you. Oof. All right. Let's see here. Dun, 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 dun. Should have one more hose we got to worry about. Now we can actually kind of get better access to it. Don't know if you guys can see that. There, now you can. Yeah, right there in the kind of the bottom of your screen. We have to get some pliers on it and then wiggle it loose. And I'm not going to film it because all you're going to see is my shoulder. And then we'll have the coolant bottle out of the way. Let us turn our attention to the upper radiator hose over here. Now there is a special plier you can use for this, and it's really useful for the harder to grab ones, but for the easier to grab spring clamps, you can just use some needle nose. Ooh. Alright. See, not bad. It's kind of rusty in there, a little scaly, but not terrible, all things considered. So let me get the other end here. You're not really going to be able to see much anything, but sure. So I always get divided opinions on you should show more of you doing the work, or no, you talk too much, or all of the above. Why am I even watching this video? As I said before, I'm just a guy working on stuff in his yard. All right. Takes care of that. It's not terrible. Definitely used, but I'm not seeing any milkshake, which is emulsified oil. So that's cool. All right, next thing we got to go after is the fan. and the fan shroud. And the good news is, I don't think in this one we have anything that's clipped or bolted to the bottom of the shroud. On my 97.54 engine that I have, you do. And it's pretty annoying when you forget about it. And you got the shroud halfway out. Yeah, okay. Yeah, getting to the fan's gonna be obnoxious, but that's why I have a step ladder. Let me go get the fan removal tools and talk about those for a second. We'll get that done. Alrighty, to pull a fan on a Ford Triton 5.4, you will need a 36mm wrench. You will also need a specialty removal tool. What this does is there are 4 bolts that hold the fan to the fan pulley, so it'd be the clutch to the pulley, and this slides over those nuts. Then you insert breaker bar in the top, and you use these two and you push them against each other to break your fan nut loose, so you can spin the fan off, get the fan spun off, then you can take the shroud out. So let's kind of go over the top and I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, check it out. So there's our fan. Sorry, not fan clutch. It's just where the fan bolts into the pulley. So here's fan. There's our big 36mm nut. And you can see there are 4 nuts that are kind of equidistant all the way around. So what you're supposed to do is take this guy and you get him positioned how you want with a breaker bar in the top. And then you've got your 36 on the big nut. You have your other guy in position and you just give it the heave-ho, pop it loose. By the way, this fan is threaded normally, which means that righty-tighty, lefty-loosey applies. Turn it to the right to tighten it, turn it to the left or counterclockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on your persuasion, to loosen it. I bring this up because earlier Fords, and I'm sure other manufacturers did this, they put this on counter threaded, which meant that if you wanted to loosen it, you would turn it to the right. And if you wanted to make it tight, you would turn it to the left. This is not the case. This has a normal threading. Right is tight, left is loose. Let's get this set up. Okay, so the removal tool has slipped, but your basic setup does look a little something like that. I'm gonna fiddle fart around this to get what I want, and then I'll give it the heave-ho. Unfortunately, I don't think I can get coverage with the camera. I'll try, but I mean, you're not missing much. All right, let's see what that does. Oh boy. This is one case where having a van actually worked out in my favor. This thing is a little ridiculous to work on. We're up in the air here. Okay. Come on. You can see it can be a pain in the butt to get this tool to line up and do what you want it to do. Here we go. Never mind, tool slipped. Here we go. Never mind, tool slipped. Ah! Okay, got it. That was fun. So you can actually just spin it off. Do keep in mind that once you get towards the end there, it's gonna just fall straight down. And it's got some weight to it, so, you know, make sure that your fan doesn't fall forward and bash a radiator, which you've got a ton of room on these F-Series trucks. It's not like my van where everything's all jammed together. Okay, so the fan's out, which means our next steps are we need to pull the shroud bolts, which should have one there. It's an 8mm. And we should have one over there, 8mm. We should not have any at the bottom. It should be 2 little feet that go into tabs. So we take these 2 out, and then we can just get the shroud and the fan, lift them up and out. Get this out without wrecking. Now, if you're lucky, you can create enough room that you can kind of pull the fan out. And deal with the shroud separately, which as you can see is what I'm trying to do here. Just need a little bit of altitude. There we go. All right. So now the fan's out. And that makes dealing with the shroud much easier. So now, that feels like it's caught on something. There might be, yep, I need to go look underneath. There's something attached to the shroud holding it in. And this is what it is. There is a clamp here, and I'm gonna go be patient. If you have a trim tool, it works great to pop this loose. Same design on my 97, just in a different place. But get your trim tool, pop this loose, get the radiator hose out of there, and then the shroud should come right up. All right. Kind of get it up in there, work it. Oh man, this one wants to fight. Wants to fight really hard. Oh, too bad, I win. All right, so now the clamp's loose. You can see the shroud now. It's quite happy to go up, so let's go top side. Okay. Oh yeah. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay. And with that, we're heading the right direction. So next thing we can do is take off the accessory belt, system belt, serpentine belt, whatever you want to call it. Thingy in the front, that's a belt. We need to take it off. All right, so tensioner is going to run off of a 1/2 drive. So the 1/2 drive that you used to remove your fan, you use that again. It's going to go right here. And it's going to need to go to the right to release tension. A little something like that. Now, the longer your lever, the easier this is. Wow, this tensioner is mean. Okay, next time I'll go for my longer breaker bar. Anyway, that's off. If you do not have a belt diagram, for your vehicle. There should be one on a sticker up here. Let you guys get a good look. That's how it needs to go if you have an air conditioner. If you don't have this, this is readily available online, or reference this because I'm showing you. You can just freeze the video. Take a look. So let me finish getting that off. And we actually have a pulley we got to take off too. The crank pulley's got to come off, and then we got to work on the cam side of things. Okay, so off camera, as you can see, I took the air intake out. It just pops out on this side. That's not good. Don't know why there's a bunch of rust sitting in there. Oh, I know where that's from. That's from up here, yay! Considering that's the air intake. But we need to get our valve cover off, right? I am holding on that. I'm not sure if I have the right kind of puller for the crank pulley yet. I'm gonna make sure I do. If I don't, I'm gonna go buy the right one, and then I'll show you how to do that. Because normally you need like a 3-jaw puller, and I don't think I have one. So we need to get this plastic guide off of this bolt, because this is one of our valve cover bolts, and we need to get this guide off. And we're gonna want to take this breather line off, which that's not particularly hard. And oh wow, this line's pretty hard. It needs to be replaced, but it's not a simple line. It's fancy, it's formed. So that means I have to go buy it from Ford or somebody. Gotta get those off. That'll let us kind of swing this ladderway or raceway, however you want to call it, out of the way. And then we can actually get to our valve cover bolts and get them off. I don't think we're gonna need to pull our coils or anything, but we might need to disconnect the coils. Gonna see. This side is the driver's side. It's gonna be easier over there than the passenger because there's just more annoying junk in the way over there. We'll take care of the easy side first. We'll go from there. All right, final updates for this evening. I have loosened most of the valve cover bolts across the bottom here. Gotten 1 or 2 up top. There's one in the deep, dark corner at the bottom back there. I don't know how I'm gonna get it. I'm actually gonna go do some research to see how other folks did it, because it may be that you just have to chop a hole in that fiberglass heat shield there to get enough clearance to get a tool in there. We'll find out. Anyway, I'm done for the night. I got other things I got to do, and I will pick this back up tomorrow. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is a new day. Going after the power steering pump, but I wanted to show you guys this. This is why it's good to get under your vehicle every now and again. Yeah, those are the retention clamps for your inner and outer tie rod on the driver's side. You don't want this loose. This is what keeps this from spinning around and then your tie rod just kind of adjusting itself as you drive. So yeah, it looks like how Ford did it is this is a carriage bolt. So everything is done at the nut. So you tighten the nut up snug and then that's it. So I'll take care of that. But what I wanted to show you is our power steering pump. Now, there is a bolt right there, and the engine cradle is directly below it. So you can't hit this with a long extension. You're gonna have to kind of sneak up in there and maybe hit it with a deep well 10. You may want to grab, if you got a converter, or maybe you have a 10mm in 1/2-inch drive, use that. Because I tried to get at, I think it was that guy there, and it does not want to go. And I got on it with a 3/8, and it said, "No thank you, sir. You're not going anywhere." So I'm gonna have to figure out how to bring a little more firepower to bear on that. But those are your, I think, 3 bolts there. 1, 2, and 3. Kind of hiding up back there. They're 10 millimeter. Like I said, probably need a 1/2 inch. If you can get an impact driver on something, that would be good too. You do not have to disconnect either the high or low pressure power steering lines. We just need to get this out of the way. If you got to do it, you got to do it. Just understand you're going to need to grab some ATF to refill your power steering. Some Dexmark ATF specifically. So I'm going to look at this top side and see what I can do from there. But as you can see, all these bolts are kind of facing the bottom, so I don't think there's a ton I'll be able to do. Let's see. All right, so I told a little lie. Oopsies. I have disconnected the rad hose going in right there, and I also disconnected the low pressure line where it goes into the pump. And I laid that out over here. If you're quick, you won't lose a lot of fluid. I was not quick. I had already put a pan in position, so I've got ATF, not a big deal. I look at it as doing a drain and fill to improve performance on the power steering pump. Anyway, once I did all that, I was finally able to get in with a 10 millimeter, as you can see, using my 1/2, so I got some leverage, and it's finally moving, and that's one of the 3. The one that's a little further back, I can probably get it the same way, hopefully. And then the third guy, I'm gonna have to stare from the bottom again and kind of see where it is. But we are finally making progress. And I did not have to mess with the high pressure line. The good news here is we have this long flexible bend in the high pressure line, so we should just be able to move it out of the way. All right, folks, ain't gonna lie, that kind of sucked, but it is out of the way. So the third bolt I had to get at from underneath. I used the same 3/8. I may still have it down there, but it was a 3/8 on a very short extension with a wobble. And that let me do what I needed to do to get it out. Whew. Okay, something that should be comparatively easier. Let's get the crank bolt out, and then we'll get our crank puller, which I had to go buy one, but we'll get that on here, and we'll get the crank and the harmonic balancer off, and then that'll be cool. And then the elephant in the room, try to get that bolt, because I think we can get that. This valve cover shouldn't be that bad. This one's going to be a little bit more interesting. We got a bunch of crap in the way, but as I have already drained the coolant, you know, this is a heater core line, that's easy to move. PCV will come right out, it's not a big deal. You take those 3 nuts off, this whole evap plate comes loose, and you can get that out of the way so you can see what you're doing. You know, so we'll see what we can do. Good news, something I had forgotten but then remembered doing research. If you own an F-250, if you have this truck, if you have an 01 F-250 and it's a true F-250 Super Duty, which in 2001 it should be, because they stopped doing the non-Super Duty F-250s in 98, 99. Anyway, since it was known this is going into a heavier vehicle, it does not have an EGR. In fact, more specifically, now that I think about it, even though it uses OBD2, this truck was held to OBD1 emissions standards. So it does not have an EGR valve, which in this case is good, because if you watch any of these repair videos on the net, either on the drivers or the passenger side, there's a giant metal pipe that comes up from the exhaust manifold to the EGR, and it's located on the back behind the throttle body, and you got to get it loose and get it out of the way, and it's a giant pain in the butt. We don't have that. You have other things that are pains in the butt, but not that one. Oh, hey, I don't have the weird upside down thermostat. Sweet. I think starting in 02 and beyond, the thermostat was moved to the bottom, the bolts. So you have to take the entire plastic upper intake off in order to change your thermostat. Now that I know that, I think I'm going to change the thermostat because I haven't done it in this truck since I owned it. And I'm right there, so I might as well. Anyway, I am blabbering. Let's take care of the crank. All right, let's see if this thing does not fall down. We shall see. There, that's a little better. Our crank bolt is an 18 millimeter. It's a regular thread, so we can get on it. Oh, yeah. So, something I forgot. If you've already taken your accessory belt off, which you have if you're following this video, unless you jerk it real hard, you're not going to be able to break this loose because it's going to be tighter than what resistance compression from the cylinders is going to give you. So this is where you break out your impact driver and you pop it with your impact driver, which I'm going to go grab that real quick. If you don't have an impact driver, if you can still get it off, but it's a pain. See, that was in there pretty decent. So there we go. There's a big washer there. Don't lose it. Okay, now we're ready to bust loose with our crank puller. Get the pulley / harmonic balancer off. So there's a few different styles of crank pullers. This is going to be a 3-bolt puller. Sometimes you have a 2-bolt puller. It just depends on what you buy. This is also a general use puller. It's not specifically for cranks. You can use it wherever. Well, not exactly wherever, but it has multiple applications. Anyway, how this works is pretty straightforward. Of this variety of metric and SAE bolts, you're going to find some metric bolts that can thread into some holes that are located in the crank pulley. Okay? And then you're going to take big guy here. He's going to get threaded through the middle. Kind of like that. Okay? Then you're going to put this tip in the center so that this cannot push through the middle. So it's going to go in kind of like that. Or it may need to... No, that's fine. So this works. Okay, and what's going to wind up happening, and you'll see this whenever I actually start doing it, is this is going to push where the crank bolt was. And then as we keep turning it, what's actually going to happen is it's going to use these other bolts that we have threaded through it into the pulley. It's going to start to pull the pulley away from what it's sitting on. And eventually it goes boop and it pops off. And then you're ready to rock. So that's how that works. And you'll see how the setup here in a minute. All right, so there's your setup. So you've got 2 bolts in. Let me zoom in there. 2 bolts are in. And I couldn't quite get a short set in there, but those fit, they go in. And then you've got your tip in where the crank bolt was, and then you run the actual puller all the way in until you're tight against the bolts. And I was a dingus. I just did all this with no washers. Should be okay, but you were supposed to put washers on your support bolts there. I didn't do that, so we're gonna go for it as is. You need to, best is to use anti-seize, but you need to lube down your main pusher thread there, the black one. Lube it down and keep it wet so you don't accidentally strip threads, because there's a lot of force that's about to get delivered. That's a 14 millimeter at the end there. I'm going to switch to a breaker bar with a 14, and then we're going to start to slowly crank it. And as we crank it, we should start seeing the pulley back off. Okay, here we go. Some people will use an impact driver at this point. You gotta be careful doing that. You can strip stuff out. So I prefer to go slow. And hopefully it starts to move before we run out of thread. That would be inconvenient. Well, I'll bring you back when it actually starts to move. All right, I think I'm gonna win out by a couple of threads here. It is moving, it's almost off. And there it goes. All right. So in my case, I'm just gonna leave the stuff attached. And I gotta figure out where the schnoz just fell off to. Because as you can see, this is what we were pushing against, and this is why you need the schnoz. So, I gotta figure out where that ran off to. That's nice. But it's around, it probably just fell down, hit the ground. Anyway, with that, that takes care of all the stuff down below. Now we are left with the valve covers. So I bought some doodads that hopefully will let me tackle that tough one in the corner, and then we can just keep on moving. Alrighty, so this is the new goodie that hopefully is going to help us out here. These are U-joints. Normally you get like a universal one that'll come in a toolkit, or you'll get a swivel or something like that. These are brand new at Harbor Freight, at least for the Icon variant, and I am fortunate enough that I make enough money with my day job that I can spend money and buy Icon stuff. You know, I don't have Snap-on money, I don't have Mac money, I don't even have Tongue Tools money. Psst, someone sponsor me. But I do have Icon money, so hopefully we can use this and get around that really weird tight angle and get her out. So we're gonna find out. Okay, I got it, and it absolutely worked because I had this amazing U-joint tool. I will be using these so much more in the future. What I also had to do to get the angle I needed, because the thing about these U-joints is if they're cranked over this tight like that, they can't rotate 360 degrees. They jam up. You need to get them about there, and then they can rotate around their joint. So I use this, you can see, as you can see, there we go. Took a long extension so I could get some angle and move it back. I also, as you can see, the insulation's all messed up. I cut the insulation away right around that area, and that granted me like another 1/4 of an inch, and I needed that 1/4 of an inch. That's the way I figured out how to do it. You may find another way. That's how I did it. Okay, some updates. So I tried my best to get this out, its companion over here out. I couldn't. So I gave it a mighty yank and the plastic just tore clean in two. Ostensibly, this is just one of those, you know, you push it on and it sits on the bolt and, you know, you're happy. You're done. But this seems to have kind of rust welded itself on. I've seen this happen with plastic and metal before. I'm at peace with it. This is a work truck, I don't care. But you may have some difficulties if you're trying to preserve that. You can also see I disconnected coils and fuel injectors. So all 4 coils and 3 of your 4 injectors need to come loose. And then here's a pro tip. If you take your dipstick out, you can get just enough clearance to get this on the other side of the dipstick. I tried taking the dipstick out, but there might be a bolt I'm missing, or it's held in with adamantium. I can't get it out. So I just got this on the other side of that to assist with getting this valve cover off. I also had to disconnect the ECT because it's on that harness. And then I think this is a cam position sensor. Disconnected that. So I'm gonna get my slip jaw pliers out and I'm gonna try to get these suckers off or destroy them or whatever I gotta do to get them out of the way so that I can get to the bolts underneath. And based on time, I'm probably gonna call it quits when I get this one valve cover off. I would have liked to have gotten everything ready and then taking the timing cover off tomorrow, but nah, I have stuff and things I gotta do that are time sensitive, so I have to knock off by a certain time. But I will not have that restriction tomorrow. So I anticipate getting this done tomorrow, and it shall be good. Okay, let's get to it. Okay, got them off. Secret sauce was to wiggle and pull. Once I rotated them enough to break free, I could wiggle and pull. Got it the rest of the way off. Can't really do that when it's attached to everything else. I mean, in theory, I guess you could try to detach it here, you know, so you can try, but I mean, best of luck to you, honestly. I don't know how I would have been able to preserve it. Anyway, like I said, I'm gonna get the rest of these bolts off now. Well, folks, things escalated. As you can see, the cover is finally off. That was entirely not fun. I had to pull the fuel rail because where the quick disconnects are back there, it prevents the back of the valve cover from being able to come up and clear over that back cam cap tower over there. So here we are. Finally got this off. Like I said, it sucked. As you are struggling, the keepers on these bolts are going to start coming out. So I just piled them here. One thing I'm pleased to see, there's not really any sludge in here, which is good. I mean, if we take a look, there's a little coating of dust now from all my struggles, but nothing is broken. I mean, the cams definitely show that they have, the cam lobes show they have 277,000 miles on them. And I will definitely be bringing some air out here when we're wrapping everything up, and we're gonna blast or vacuum, whatever. We're gonna do something to get this dirt that's falling in out best we can. I'm gonna throw some towels over this because it was absolute murder to get that thing out. Look down there. I'm gonna have to clean that insulation away. But it looks okay. Oh, there's the cam sensor right there. It looks okay for a truck that has 277,000 miles on it. Good rule of thumb when you're dealing with things like cam lobes or bearing journals, things like that, if you can run your fingernail across it and it doesn't catch, you're all right. If it catches, you're pretty banged up and you may need to resurface. Okay, this is my stopping point today. Some towels over this, button this up, and see what tomorrow brings. Good grief. I'm hoping that this guy is not going to have as much ridiculousness going on in the back. It's because that real tight corner right there, if they had beat out just like a 3x3 section right there, it would have made this so much easier. But they did not. So here we are. All right. See you guys tomorrow. Good morning, everybody. Today is a new day. I went ahead and disconnected the battery because we're going to be doing a lot of work where we're leaning over stuff in this area. I don't feel like getting buzzed, so disconnected that for safety. I have removed I think this is the evap purge solenoid, is what this is. Sits on a bracket. It's got a electrical connector. It's got some hoses on it, some vacuum on it. I have disconnected all of that. The bracket it's held on to is held with 10mm nuts right there. And I did all that because I'm trying to open up space over here. So the next thing that's going to go is we're going to get, let's see if I can reach it. PCV valve's got to come out. And that can be taken loose at the other end if we need to. All right. So I took a look at the fuel rail, and the fuel rail sits further back in this case. So I think as long as we just disconnect all the electricals on the coils and the fuel injectors, we'll be good. We do once again have those ridiculous plastic retainers in a couple of places, and they gotta go. I will try to save them, but ultimately the name of the game here is we're trying to get stuff done, right? So they gotta go. They gotta go. One thing I'm not sure about yet is the case for the evaporator, which is that big black case that these nuts and everything are sitting on, and that the dryer is attached to. Dryer is this cylinder here. See, it's attached right there. I am not sure if we're gonna have the room to do what we gotta do. Oh yeah, and I disconnected this heater core line. With that case in place, I will see. I'm not terribly concerned about getting all the bolts along the top as long as I can get the wire harness moving. But I do have some worries about getting all the ones on the bottom. Good news is, if we take a look there on the bottom in the very back, we do have a bolt that's buried way back there. But the good news is the firewall is not right there. It's not going to be ridiculous to get to and extract like the driver's side was. Now, if we can get this case off, that's a ton of extra space, and you should be able to take the case off without having to open your AC system. From what I understand though, it is 11 bolts that are scattered willy-nilly all the way around the thing. So kind of a big job unto itself. We will see. So I'm just going to kind of do periodic updates as I'm pulling stuff off, because this is pretty similar to what we did on the driver's side. The only difference is going to be is if there's a particularly nasty bolt or something that I feel there's some tips I can give on, you know, I'll talk about that. But otherwise, I'm just going to try to power through this to get this valve cover off, so then we can finally remove the timing cover up here in the front. Oh, I see. So I missed some stuff. This idler is going to have to come off, and the tensioner is going to have to come off, and then we'll have good access up front. So whoops, I missed that, but those aren't hard to take off particularly now. So anyway, we're going to get chewing on all of that. I'll bring you back if there's something interesting. So idler on the passenger side, because you do have two idler pulleys. So idler on the passenger is a 13mm, and the 3 bolts that hold your tensioner are 10mm. One other thing I didn't realize needed to go is our water pump pulley. It's held in place with 4 10mm bolts. The best time to remove these is when you still have it under tension with the accessory belt. It'll help you break them loose. If you're like me and you're a dingus and you didn't realize this, your next best friend is going to be an impact driver, because it just has so much torque, it'll bust those bolts loose before this has a chance to start spinning. So I've done that, and it seems kind of glued on there. And I did a quick bit of research. This pulley is not pressed on. It is held in with those 4 bolts. So this one is stuck because it's probably been there for 20 years and it just don't want to go. So you can try to be nice to it using a rubber mallet, which is what I have been doing off camera, but it's not going. So now I got to be a little mean to it. And you may want to plug your ears when you do this. It gets loud. I saw it move. Yep. Almost there. I need to beat on it a little more. Dang, man. Yeah, it's on there good. Anyway, keep whacking on it and working it back and forth until it comes off. I'm not going to subject you guys to that really ridiculously loud ringing noise. But, I mean, again, you still don't want to go too crazy because you'll damage it and potentially split it. Think of it like a brake drum, if you've ever had to beat on a brake drum to get it off. So we get this out of the way, and then I'll get back around to the thing I really don't want to work on, which is that valve cover. But this should be the very last thing that needs to get out of the way that's big in the front. After that, it's all valve cover all the time. And we get that out of the way. All right, the very end of the passenger's wire harness takes you to this sensor right here. I think it's a crank position sensor. I've had it out before because of the compressor. I replaced the compressor in this thing. So we can get it out of the way. Come on, baby. No, it's telling me no, you're not doing that. I may have to use my left hand because it's stronger. But anyway, we get that out of the way. The looming up top came up clear, and we should have a pretty clear shot at everything. I'll show you what I did here in a minute. All right, so you can see top side now, we're making some room here, right? So we can, since we disconnected that crank position sensor, we can now get this whole harness out of the way. And then if I can get it out of its little loom there in the back, then this came right off, I think, because this side's oily. Because I think you get oil vapor coming out of here. I can get that way out of the way. As you can see, we now have some room, right? We actually might be able to pull this off and it not be completely insane. Coming back over here, so we have everything off, but we have some wire harnesses in the way, right? So to that end, I'll show you the connectors. The one on the right there is the clutch control for the AC. Took that off. This guy here is the high pressure cutoff switch for your AC system. Took that one off. Pro tip on this one, you know how normally with connectors you push the tab down to release it? This one's the other way. You pull it up. Pull the tab up to release, and then it comes right off. So the other end of this ultimately is the alternator whip. So I'm going to take that off so that way I can very easily just take this, move it over to the side, have absolutely nothing in the way, because I've never done this before. And what I have learned over the years is when projects fail, it's generally not one huge failure. There's a little thing and you're compensating for that, and another little thing and you're compensating for that, and another little thing. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. These things adds up until you're not giving enough attention to what you need to give attention to, and then bam, something critical breaks, fails, is done wrong, whatever, and ultimately you get a failure. I don't want to do that. I'm willing to spend more time getting this done so that that does not happen. Because I like this truck. I want to get a lot more years of work out of it, so I don't want to accidentally destroy the engine by timing it wrong or doing the timing job wrong. Anyway, I'm going to ferret that little guy out in the back. I'm going to get the alternator whip off. And then once all that is done, you can see, I forgot to mention, but this is the harness line for the fuel injectors and the coils, their power. Once that's all out of the way, I'm actually going to start cracking bolts. And we're going to see just how well I can contort myself to get all the way in the back over there. All right, show you what you got to do for the alternator whip if you choose to do this. There's a 10mm right there. You've got two connectors. That one actually has the dog ear that's going to be, you're going to have to fight it to get it out, get a screwdriver under it. This one kind of just pops out. You've got a little plastic guide sitting on that stud, so you just pop it off. Once you do that, now if I can get off my step stool without killing myself, look at that. This is out of the way. Now we have nothing in the way except for a little vacuum line, and I can just throw that out of the way further. So and look at that. I got that shoved out of the way. So we're ready to start popping bolts finally. All right guys, things escalated. So that one had rusted off enough that a 5/16, which also fits, but it's a hair smaller than an 8mm, couldn't turn it. So I have an extractor socket, which you're pretty desperate if you're getting to your extractor sockets because they almost never work. But in this case it worked. You'll notice I had to cut the stud off of it because my extractor socket is not a deep well. In case you've never seen what one looks like that. So it doesn't have smooth walls. It has walls that are designed to dig into the fastener with the assumption that you've already boogered it up at this point. I got that one out, but then the extractor could not get this one out. So I had to do it the old way. I took my cutting tool and I cut a little nick in the side of the nut. And then I took a screwdriver and my 4-pound hammer and just started wailing on it. And I was able to dig in just enough to knock it loose, just enough that with what little grip the extractor socket had, you could turn it. So it's out, or it's loose. And with that, all of them are now loose. These were the last two that I have just spent about 2 hours fighting with. Things I do. Anyway, I need to go around and get all of them fully out, and then we will try to lift the valve cover. And if we're lucky, then the next thing we get to do is actually lift the timing cover and see what's up. And there we are. It's off. Now, you can get it off without taking this HVAC box off. It's going to be a fight, and the thing you got to keep in mind when we go to put this back in is we're going to have to put some dabs of RTV where the block meets the timing cover, which is here, and then there's one over there. So it's going to be not real fun to get that back in. You take that out, it's going to be significantly less painful, but it's going to be painful unto itself to try to take that off. So I leave that up to you to make your decision on how you want to approach that. That being said, we got the valve covers off, so we can finally pull the timing cover, and then we can finally begin the actual timing job. Everything up to now has just been getting all the crap out of the way so we can do the job. It's ridiculous. All right, timing cover. You're gonna have one here, there, and you got one down there, one by the compressor, and then pretty sure down there where that stud is, and then nothing on this side. There's no stud or anything, so maybe not. One right there, one right there, that one right there, this one here, that guy there, and then yeah, there's one directly below the water pump right there. And so far we haven't really had to worry about the lengths of screws. We may need to start worrying about that now. So let's carefully take out these timing cover bolts. And if we come up with something that's a different length, we need to make a note. It's a different length for a reason. I know that this will be a thing during the actual timing job, but I'm not sure about the cover. So anyway, let's get on it, eyeballing it. I'd say that's a 13 or a 14, somewhere in there. Let's get these out of here. So do not forget these studs, there's a bigger nut behind them. These studs, they're sticking out. They're holding various accessory things like this one. There's a sensor that's supposed to go here. And those are 18s. Don't forget to take those out. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of them that need to come out. And once all that's out of the way, I think we can take a screwdriver or pry bar and we can probably get this cover off. And I'm going to go ahead, and that's going to be where I'm going to end it today. It is brutally hot, and I already know I got to order some parts because I've got the messed up fasteners over here, and then unfortunately I wasn't paying attention and I ripped the wire out of this guy. So I got to replace him. I don't even know what it is. I'll be honest, I don't know what it is. You know, it just kind of sits there hanging off of the valve cover. I don't know if it's like a barometric sensor or outside air sensor or what. But I'm going to find out because I got to replace it. All right, let's get to it. So the two bolts that go in the very bottom, they're a little different. Their stud nut is a 22 millimeter, and for whatever reason this particular nut, this was on the passenger side, was a 15 millimeter instead of a 13. All those were 13s. This guy was a 15. No clue why. All right, I think we have finally gotten every single stinking fastener out of this timing cover, and we can actually try to separate it. So let's see what happens. Okay. So I actually don't know how hard or how easy it's gonna be to try to separate this thing. So just doing some prying here, taking advantage of the camshaft. I don't know if we missed any fasteners. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know here. So probably shouldn't be prying off the camshaft sensor. That's probably not the best of ideas. It's acting like I missed something down below. Let me go take a look. And I sure did. There are 4 bolts that come in from the oil pan that go into the bottom of the timing cover. And they look like they're 13s, so let's get those out. Oh. This thing is connected to everything. Here, let me show you. Alright. See right there? 1, 2, 3, 4. I imagine that's actually our final 4. They're 13s. See, we can't get these goobers out. Alright, let's try this again with our 4 bolts removed. There it is. Oh, what a mess it was to get to that. Oy, 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 oy. Alright, let's get the flashlight and let's take a look at what we're working with here. Okay, so let me bring you over so we can take a look. So depending on when you got to this, you need to inspect your timing cover for signs that the chain has been slamming around in it. Now it looks like for me, I got to this in time. In time. So I don't see any damage to the timing cover. Looks pretty good. Timing cover has kind of weird seals. They're not full loop, they're just pieces. That's normal. Your replacement kit should have that. And then also this seal has to come out and be replaced. And that one we're just going to use like a, we'll come in from this side. We'll use a big plate, we'll just tap it in. Okay. Other important things to talk about with this. The interior of your oil pan is now exposed. Okay? Which means if you're not wrapping up the job today, which I'm not, you need to take some rags and shove them down there. Keep garbage from getting in there. Also, if you're doing a timing job and you've come this far, it is not a bad idea to go ahead and replace the oil pump, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. Now, probably the last thing I'm going to do, just so I have a good shot at getting rags in there, is I'm going to take that tone ring you see off. That big sprockety looking thing that's just sitting there. Because then the actual timing sprocket is behind that, the one that's got the chains looped around it. So there's tensioner on the passenger side. Here's tensioner on the driver's side. There's the guides. It looks like my guides are still in one piece, best I can tell. Which is good, it means I got to this in time. Because if you let that chain rattle go on too long, these plastic guides start to get ripped apart. And after that's ripped apart, it starts ripping apart the timing cover. So we did it, guys. How cool is that? Get that sprocket off, and then what I'll probably actually do is just throw the timing cover back on, throw a bolt or two in the top. After I shove, well, I'll shove some rags in, I'll just close the hood, and that should be good enough. So, cool. Oh, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is a new day. So today, we are going to actually start on the timing job. And the first thing we need to do is we're going to get the cams in the appropriate position to start the timing job, and then we're going to lock them down with the specialty cam holding tool that I pointed out very beginning of this video. So there are marks on the cam sprockets. Right there is the one on this cam, and right there, okay? So here's what we got to do. We need to get this mark pointing at 12 o'clock, so that's going to be straight up and down. About where this hole is actually is where we want it. And then on the passenger side, we want our cam mark at about 11 o'clock. So about right there, about where my finger is. And the way we're going to do this is we are going to rotate the crank. Now, again, I am following another YouTuber's video on how to do this. So if you want to see my source material, it will be in the description. I don't have a 32 millimeter to try to turn the whole thing, but we do have a crank bolt, right? So that's an 18 millimeter, and I can take my breaker bar and I'm going to start rotating this until we get to roughly the position we need. And then we're going to lock them down, the cams. So I'm going to put you on the tripod and we'll bring it around. By the way, I figured out what this is, the thing I broke. It is a I have forgotten the fancy term, EMI. It is an EMI filter, electromagnetic interference filter. Essentially what it does is it prevents the coils, when they're doing their thing, from producing basically squeal that can be picked up on AM radio and on really old CRT TVs. That's what that is. There's two of them, one on for each bank of coils. So technically you can run without it, but you may annoy some person who has super ancient stuff or is listening to AM radio. Anyway, just thought I would say that. I've got you pointed at the driver's cam because it has better visibility than the passenger cam. And I'm gonna go ahead and start rotating stuff. So remember, it's 12 o'clock on the driver's cam, it's 11 o'clock on the passenger cam. Oh, hey, engine has compression. Who'd have thunk? Getting close. Bring it back. Yeah, I think that's about it. That looks roughly like 12, and that looks roughly like 11. Let me show you what I see. So we've got our mark is now, it's actually, I'd say it's a hair off. It needs to come back a little bit. And then that is roughly 11 o'clock. I mean, I would more argue that's 10 o'clock, but you know. And once it has to be approximate. It doesn't need to be super precise, but approximate, so that when we're doing our final timing adjustments, we don't have to do big changes. It's incremental small changes. So let's go ahead and get our cam locks in place. So there's a third piece of this puzzle that I neglected to mention. We want the crankshaft, which is this fella here, we want him with the Woodruff key, which is this slot right here. We want that at 12 o'clock. So we want this at 12, this at 11, and then we want this guy at 12. So this is roughly at 12, that's roughly at 11, but we have a problem here. That's not at 12, so we are not where we need to be. And the way we fix that is we just continue to rotate the crank until we can bring it around again to see if that's going to give us a better look. Because one thing to remember is for every time the crankshaft makes a full circle, the camshafts make 2 full circles. Okay, so what can happen when you're doing engine timing, and that what I'm talking about is, say if you have an older vehicle with a distributor where you can still set the time on it, you can wind up 180 degrees off with your time because of this feature, the fact that your cams, or cam if you know it's a single overhead cam, turns 2 times for every time the crank turns 1 time. All right, so let's get our tool back on here and let's get her spun around. All right, so I brought it all the way around, and with the Woodruff key at 12 o'clock, here's what we get. We get our cam over here on the driver's side at around like 1.5, 2. That's as close as we're going to be able to get. And our passenger cam is pretty dang close to 11. Not quite, but close. So this is what we're going to work with, because if I go around 1 full rotation, it is way off. So this is where we need to be. You should wind up looking a little something like this. We're close, we don't quite have it, but we're close enough that we can go ahead, lock down the cams, and get started. Oh, looky, more surprises. So that is rat damage, mouse damage. That probably occurred when it was sitting and the previous owner still had it. And this connected to the oil pressure sender, or the dummy switch on your instrument cluster. Still working okay, but I don't know how. So I have ordered a new pigtail, and I had to cut this one to get the sensor off so I could actually get the connector off. Fun. Anyway, that's a 21 millimeter, if that comes up for you. Okay, let's get started on this. Okay, we are going to place the cam lock on the second section of the cam coming from the front. So it's going to go here, and as a reminder, here's our tool, and we're going to unbolt it. We're going to place it around the cam, and then these ears are going to reach out and brace against the head and keep it from rotating. That's how this is going to work. One thing to note, if you somehow came across this video and you have a, I think it's if you have a 4.2 liter V6 or a 4.6 liter V8, the small 8, you need to look on your VIN at the 9th digit and figure out where your engine was made. So for example, this 5.4 liter is a Windsor engine. It was made in, I think, Windsor, Canada, or province of, I don't know, Ontario. I'm not good on my Canadian provinces. But that's where it was made. This tool was made for that. However, there are what are called Romeo engines. They're oh so different. Just slightly different. Different enough that this tool will not fit correctly on the head. And you need to get the appropriate cam locking tool for your engine. So just throwing that out there. I think all 5.4 liter engines are Windsors, so you don't really have to worry about it if you're working a 5.4 and your tool says it's for a 5.4. But if it's other engine displacements, you may need to do some homework. So I had to do some minor alterations to our tool here. You may notice there's a big fat stack of washers in there. What was going on is, as I was trying to tighten this down so it clamped from the top and the bottom of the clamp pieces, it was beginning to bend the C channel metal, right? It was starting to bow, and it wasn't going to happen. So I had to space it, and that's what I did. There are 6, I think they're 5/16 grade 8 hardened washers on either bolt, and now it's clamped top and bottom, so this camshaft is going nowhere. You know, I can do this and I'm shaking the truck. So this is what happens when you don't buy the $150 OTC tool and you buy like the $30 Chinesium special. Got to do a little work to it to make it work. So it cost me $6 in washers to do that. See, I got. So let me do the other side, and then at long last we can finally get started. All right, first thing that we're going to pull is going to be our passenger tensioner. It's got this big R stamped on it. Those should be 10mm bolts. After that, we're going to go and yoink. I believe we're going to pull this chain guide out. Yeah. And that's going to be 8mm, but the thing to pay attention to here is these are different length bolts. I think that one's long and this one's short, but pay attention to that because it does matter on reinstallation and all that jazz. So let's do it. All right. Ooh, that was kind of tight. I'd almost say that you need a 3/8 when you're doing this part. Trying not to block the camera here. These are reasonably loose. I'm going to grab my Wazamahoozer and use that. Okay. Let us use the Wazamahoozer. Okay, and let's get that out. Okay. Huh. I thought I was all about the blown seals, but I have cast iron or steel tensioners with mechanical tensioning mechanism. It's not driven by oil pressure. Sorry guys, I had that totally wrong. Oh yeah, it is peat oil. Man, I forgot to put a towel there. So don't be like me and, you know, put like a towel here so that your compressor does not get peed on. All right, so we can take this out. Take a look at this guide. Yeah, see that? It had chewed through the guide plastic right here, and it was on its way out. But I caught it early enough that it didn't really damage anything, but definitely that's a failure point, so I don't feel so bad about doing this anymore. I was going to be pretty annoyed if I did all this and I didn't see evidence of chain failure. That would have been sad. But I just caught it really early. Okay, so next up we're going to tackle our upper chain guide. Remember, that's the one that's got the special bolt length. So we'll go after that next. Also note that at this point, once you've pulled the tensioner, you know, this chain is slop now, right? So at this point you're hoping you got your cam tool right, because now the springs and the valve will have an opportunity to give you a really bad day and make your cam move. And we don't want that. All right. Let's switch to my other thingy. Something I need to practice more is get it loose with the manual tool and then finish getting it out with the light duty automatic, just to save me time and save damage to my wrist. So that top one was short, and trying to put eyes on the other one. It's right there. You guys can't see that. So actually you can, but it's not a very good positioning. So all right, that's a better positioning. Let's see if we can actually break it loose, or do I need to peel the chain off of the cam to get it out? Let's see. Yeah, I can't see. Oh, I know. I can feel it there. There it is. Okay. Okay. So let me get on this again. Okay. So looking at what I have installed, the bolts are the same length. So again, I'm following Makuloco's video. I don't know. I do remember, I'm doing my research, that there's a revision where one of the bolts is lengthened to fix something. Don't remember what or where. But looking at this guy, he looks pretty good. I'm not seeing any damage here, which kind of makes sense because I caught it pretty early in the process. Okay, this is kind of spooky. We have the tensioner out and we have the guides out. Ooh. All right. I think the next thing we do is we do it to the driver's side, but I'm gonna make sure I'm not missing anything here. So I figured out the bolt thing on the tensioner. The long bolt, short bolt on the tensioner guide comes from the 3-valve. The 3-valve and the 2-valve basically use the same parts, except for there is a design improvement on the 3-valve, so it necessitates a long and a short bolt. If you're doing this on a 2-valve for the first time, the bolts are going to be the same length. But if you have a quality replacement kit, like this milling kit, like I mentioned a minute ago, it has the long bolt you're going to need with the improved part. So the bolt order is still going to matter, but not on the coming out. So we've got everything out. We're just going to take care of the driver's side, and we're also going to pull the crank sprocket, and then I am done for the evening. I have to go be dad. So let's get this out. If I can find my 10mm. Hey, found it. I'm going with 3/8 because this tensioner requires a little mustard to get out. Okay. you guys haven't figured out, I'm not the strongest dude in the world. I just generally get the tools together to make it work. All right. That's one. That's two. Let's see if we can get this guy out of here. Come on. Oh, you don't want to go, do you? You say, I am under tension. I don't want to let go. Well, Mr. Pry Bar is coming out to play. I'm not going to get too crazy because I don't want to scratch anything, and I also don't want... Oh, no, we're not doing that. Come on. Okay, so I'm going to wiggle this out somehow. And then we can get this arm out of here. Right now it's pinned by the tensioner. And, you know, we can get the rest of it out. Let me see if I can wiggle this out without damaging anything. So looking at the driver's tensioner here, it's worn. I can feel a little grooving in there, but it's not failing. This side was okay. It was the passenger side that was beginning to fail. So, again, I caught it early. Okie doke. So that one was short. Oh, this one's long. Okay, so we do have the short and long setup on this side. I'm gonna preserve that. Put these bolts, and I'll transfer it over when I grab the new part, but I'm putting the bolts back in the part, and I'm gonna just lay the part down. That way the bolt order is preserved. All right, let's get that chain off. Let's see here. Okay. That is a chain. And the last thing we need is the crank sprocket, which I can get that off once I take my 18 out of there. Because I used that to turn things earlier. So far, so good. I haven't seen either of the cams turn at all. Oof, 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 oof. Well, actually, that, I almost committed a mistake there. Because even if I gotta lock that crank sprocket somehow, because otherwise I would be turning the crank, and though the cams are locked, if the crank turns, that means the pistons are moving, and I could potentially hit valves. So I should have taken that off earlier. I gotta figure this out. I could put the chain back on and try to tension it, but you are supposed to replace the crank sprocket as part of the setup. All right, I'm gonna ponder how to lock that so I can get that bolt out. I'll bring you back. All right, figured it out. So I took some slip jaw pliers, grabbed onto the sprocket as hard as I could, and then I took my impact driver, since it's got the high torque, and hit it. And fortunately it wasn't on crazy tight, so the actual crankshaft did not move, and we get the crank sprocket. Cool. Said this is my stopping point for the night. Next thing tomorrow is I'm going to show you how to remove the oil pump. We're going to clean around that area first, and then I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the oil pump without dropping the pan. Again, I'm just following Makuloco's video, but that's what we're doing. So see you tomorrow. Welcome back, everyone. Today is a new day. So we're going to start today off with the removal and replacement of the oil pump. The very first thing we got to do is clean up any of the garbage that's in the area. As you can see, we've got bits of fluff, we've got oil grime, we've got bits of dirt. We need to get as much of this out of the way as we can, so that when we work down here, we don't send junk into the pan. Obviously, we're going to have a load of fresh oil. Still, we don't want to make it any worse than it has to be. So that's step one. And then step two will be to separate the pickup tube from the pump. All right, I'm going to point this out because it's kind of hard to see. Give me a pointing stick. All right. So our two bolts that we got to remove for the pickup tube are here and here. And the tool, again, I'm following Makuloco's video here, but the tool he recommends, they're 8mm, is a 8mm flexi, something like this, with a ratcheting box. Can do this. So we'll get in there and get that out. After that, it is 3 10mm bolts to just get out of the way, and then the pump just slides off. Believe it or not. Okay, let's see. If I'm facing that way, I turn it this way. So we need to turn it. There we go. That wasn't bad. I got to reposition here. One thing I found interesting is I have this exact same engine in a 97 E150. If you have followed the channel, I also, have it in this truck, and everything is much more tightly packed in the E series, right? And in some cases that's helped me out, and then in other cases it's been a disadvantage. This is one of those cases where, on one hand, I got a ton of room here, but on the other hand, I have to reach really far to actually get to the hardware. Okay, it's close. We do not want to drop this in the pan. We do not. So, definitely not very fun to get out. 8mm flexi will get the job done, but you're going to need to be very patient. You cannot see this, you have to do it all by feel. And then it's a little tricky once it's finally free to get it out, not drop it in the pan. If you're afraid of dropping it in the pan, make sure you've got a magnet tool on hand. There's enough room that if you have a skinny one, you should be able to insert it, you know, and hopefully pick up the screw or the bolt in case you drop it. All right, the good news here is that our tube, if I can get the right part, is flexible. Yep, there it goes. So you can push it down, kind of get it out of the way, and then we're left with the 3 10mm that we have for the oil pump itself. Honestly, guys, I think the second hardest part of the job is behind us, which was getting that one bolt. And the hardest part of the job is still a little bit ahead of us, which is, oh, that's not a 10, is it? No, it says it's 10. That's not a 10 in this application. That's an 8. But as I was saying, I think actually the hardest part of our job here is going to be when we got to put that bolt back in. Not looking forward to that. Now, need to check these bolts and make sure their length may not be the same across all 3, so pay attention to that. All right, well, so far, first 2 are the same, lengthwise anyway. Let's see here. And survey says all 3 are the same length, so at least on this 2 valve, that is not a thing. And now, just kind of give her the wiggle scoot. We got to get it past our pickup tube. And that's it. We just took the oil pump off. How neat is that? All right, so we'll get our replacement, and then we'll prime it so it doesn't have to spin around dry for a little bit until it pulls up oil, and we'll put it back on, or we'll put the new one back on. Okay, so we're going to take this backing plate off, and the reason why we're doing that is to make things a little easier on the pump by putting some engine oil in here. I'm going to put in the oil that I'm running in my truck right now, which is 1540 diesel oil. Folks might say that's too thick, don't do that. Well, that's what I'm doing. It's an old truck with 277,000 miles on it. A little bit of thicker oil. It's not going to hurt anything here. So we're just going to kind of dribble this in and work the gear around in the oil until we have a nice layer of oil ooze all around. Then we're going to put our backing plate back on. By the way, backing plate bolts are Torx 30s, they're T30s. And I don't have a torque value on putting it back on other than snug. So that was probably way too much. As you can see, it's dribbled out into here, it's dribbled out onto my towels. But you can you'll feel it too when you're actually doing this. You can feel the extra smooth glide from the fact that it's looped up now. So, mission accomplished. I'm going to put the cover back on. And the next step is our favoriteest step ever, which is we got to clean. So get your towels, get your brake clean, get your scrapers, and we need to do what we can to clean up where this pump's going to go. and then we can install the pump, and then we got to do it all for the timing area, and then we can actually install our timing parts. All right, so one other thing to not forget is if your oil pump came with a replacement pickup tube O-ring, go ahead and swap that out. Mine did, so I'm doing it. All right, I got it as clean as I am content with. Got some brake clean out. I actually cleaned out the front of the pan. So yeah, I mean, there's stuff in there, but that's because the pan's never been off probably in 277,000 miles. Got our new O-ring on there, and when we go to install our new pump, the big thing is, you see these flats on the side of the crank in the back? Those line up with flats on the pump. So we're just gonna have to slide it on and then kind of wiggle and jiggle until we get the flats to line up, and then they seat. So again, wiggle and jiggle, don't force. You'll know you have it because it's gonna sit flush against the front of the block. The pickup tube is going to line up perfect, and if you reach behind the pump, you're only going to feel block. You're not going to feel any air gap, anything, and this should line up flush over here as well. All right, let's wiggle this on here. Let's see, maybe push that down a little bit. Oh. No, we're not quite there yet. Something's not quite lined up. Yeah. It's not Daddy, dropping all the way back. Daddy, can you help me? So when you get it, it's going to look a little something like that. Notice we're pretty much lined up here on our pickup tube. We're all the way back. If I put my finger over here, I'm against the block. Put my finger over here. Not quite against the block, but this is where we need to be. We're engaged like we need to be. So next step is we got to lock the pump back in position, and then we have to reconnect our pickup tube. And I think that's going to be the hardest part of this entire job. All right, so I have kind of finger tighted our bolts in. And now we need to tighten them up to about 89 inch-pounds. So that means we need a torque tool, which I have one here. It's brand new and very shiny. And it goes down to 5 foot-pounds. To keep things in reference, 12 inch-pounds equals 1 foot-pound. So if something is 89 inch-pounds, we'll call it roughly 7.5 foot-pounds. Okay, I couldn't find something that let me go crazy in inch-pounds, so that's as close as I can get. But it's within the range of this wrench. And it's important you get this torque right because, you know, this is the oil pump. And there is no gasket back there, so this is all down to really nice machining. So if it's too loose, it will leak, and then you're not going to be generating pressure, and then you're in trouble. So let's get these tightened up in no particular order. It's at 7.5 foot-pounds. All right.
I'm making it even lower.
Get this tightened up.
It's tiny out here. Now I want to buy this. Okay. It's unlocked.
One. Spin it around. Two. Three. And again, because no gasket here, let's make sure these are tight. So double check them. All right, we have successfully installed something new. We have finally turned the corner on destroying things, and now we're putting in new things. Next step, we've got to get the pickup tube back together. All right, pickup tube time. We're gonna start on the easy side, right? On the left. And we're gonna try to thread this guy in by hand. And the lineup should be really, really good. If your lineup is off majorly, then your pump's probably not seated. So let's try this out. Okay, this is so entirely not fun. Okay, so it went right in, but all right, I think I need to put this on the tool first before I try putting that in, because I could barely hold on and try to actually do something with that at the same time. Let me find my 8mm. Let me make sure it's set right. So that would be loosen. This would be tighten. All right. Let's see, we can't get this figured out. And honestly, I think I'm just going to turn the camera off because you guys can't see anything and I can't get you a better angle. I'll bring you back with highlights. Okay, that was not fun at all. So one on the left, not terrible. You can get your finger underneath your flexi. If I can figure out where I put my flexi. Here, I'll use this 5/16 for illustrative purposes. So you've got your flexi on your fastener. Your camera stays very, okay. So what you can do, if it's not making enough friction to turn the mechanism, push it down in your finger and then turn. And that'll provide enough friction that you can start turning it in. And eventually it'll get a little more friction and it'll work. Now, for the one on the right, same idea, except for you cannot get your finger down there. So instead, you can sneak a trim tool in there. And I had to push mine like this, but I was able to do it. And I pushed hard enough against the black, ratcheting ring that I was able to tighten it to the point where it wasn't going to fall out. Both of them went right in, which means the alignment is good on the pump. Again, our torque value here is 89 inch-pounds. There's no way on earth we're getting a torque tool in there. So this is going to be an elbow torque kind of application. You don't need to kill it. Just make sure it's snug, right? And with that, we will have successfully completed the installation of the oil pump. And we can move on to cleaning up all of our timing case area, getting gasket material out, getting sludge out, getting leftover RTV out, and then we can actually rebuild all the timing stuff and then actually get our timing cover back on, which will make me feel a whole lot better. All right, guys, welcome back. Today is a new day. I left the camera off, but I went ahead and I cleaned all gasket surfaces. I scraped and I vacuumed and I wiped down with brake clean. And those all look pretty good. I do need to pull those rags out from there and put new rags in just to keep that clean for now. But after I do that, what we're heading towards next is we're going to need to manually adjust the cams into the 11 and 12 o'clock positions we talked about earlier. As a reminder, we need to have the passenger cam, this guy, at around 11, and he looks really close. If, this is 12, straight up and down. He looks really close. We like that. But then as you can see here, the driver's cam is supposed to be at 12, right? That one's off. So we need to bring that one around. And why are we doing this? We're doing this because with the way, and you'll see when we get the chains out, with the way that this is timed, the way that the system works, the closer you get now, the less fiddle farting you have to do once you get the chains out, because the chains are going to show you exactly where this timing mark needs to be. And if you get it within, you know, a link, or maybe you get it bang on right now, it's less work in the future. Man, that wire's so bad. All right. Now, there is a special tool that is used to turn these. It's a big socket looking thing, and it has prongs that line up in these holes. I don't have that, but what you can also do is you can insert a 3/8 drive in here, an extension, and you can turn it there. So that's what we are going to do. So that is our next step. Let me get that changed out, and then we'll start on this. As a reminder, if you've been following this video, you got your cam locking tool in place, right? For this operation, we're gonna need to loosen it just a hair, maybe 1-2 turns, just enough that we can use the tool to turn the cam, but not enough that the spring pressure is going to turn the cam for us. That would be very bad. In theory, and I don't have verification on this, all the pistons are basically either flat to the block or slightly under it right now. So if the cam started to spin whirligig, nothing would hit each other. So in theory, yeah. But I don't know about you. I don't want to put that to the test. So let's continue. So for this one, I'd recommend less is more, right? We don't want springs to do scary things. So we're gonna try that first. I know that's barely anything at all, but again, less is more. Actually, we don't really, I think we're pretty good there. So let me tighten this back up, and I'll get you all pointed over at the driver's side. All right. Driver's side. So I'm going to go ahead, for the sake of expediency, have that in there. And then here we go. Okay, so that's a quarter turn. See if this will let me do anything. Yep. Okay. Probably could loosen it a hair more. So I could do it, but I had to put enough muscle behind it. I couldn't really control it. Ooh, yeah. I think half turn is all I'm gonna do. Yeah, it's actually the springs are pushing it back, but then it's being stopped, so we actually need it a little tighter, I think. So we saw it didn't run away, which is good. It also is not letting us kind of reset it. Ugh. Okay. It's a little bit too far. Let's see. Yowzas. That's what I need right there. I think what I'm going to have to do is actually get another wrench and tighten everything back up. So that is 13s over there, so I'll go grab what I need, and I guess we're gonna have to do the twofer because it would be going a bit nutty right now if I didn't have that in place. All right, so as you can see, we are really close to 12 o'clock now on the driver's head, on the driver's cam. So pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with the passenger cam. I think we can move on to the next step where we're going to need to manipulate the crank using one of our specialty tools. All right, so next step, like I said, is we need to position the crank. This is where you need that other specialty tool. And I have it on backwards, and that's to give me some swinging room because we need to get that little hole at the end to line up on that peg. When you get it to line up on that peg, you got it. The Woodruff key, that raised insert right there, should be at about 11 o'clock. That's where we need to get it to. Now, the problem is you need a 32 millimeter socket, and I'm pretty sure I don't have one. Now, I was using the crank bolt earlier. I can't really use the crank bolt for this. So this might be a way to get it done if you trust the strength of the tool, but I'm concerned about bending it because if it gets bent, then you can't use it for alignment. So I'm gonna rummage around and see, maybe I have a 32 millimeter sitting around somewhere. Okay, so I rummaged around and it turns out I did have a 32 deep well buried in my oversized socket tackle box. So that fits on there perfectly. As you can see, I then rotated it. Now here's a key thing that I did not say, and this is very important. Again, this is all based from Makuloco. He's a master Ford tech, so I reckon you should listen to him. Only turn the crank counterclockwise or anti-clockwise, or you turn it to the left. Do not turn it to the right. Turn it to the left only when you do this, okay? So you're gonna do this until you can fairly easily slide your specialty alignment tool on and off the crank, and it just pops right onto the peg. If you're having to kind of slide up against the tip and muscle it up or muscle it down, you're off a hair, and this needs to be comfortable, okay? Once you do that, we can actually start putting things back together. Now that is exciting. All right, working from our milling kit, we're going to go ahead and put in our new passenger guide arm. It's going to be a BG414P. For reference, it's a little confusing because we're facing the engine, but the passenger side is considered the right hand, and the driver's side is considered the left hand. Now, remember how I told you there was a design improvement that they did in the 3 valves? Well, they backported that improvement to the 2 valves. So the milling kit comes with a longer bolt for top, and then you still have your shorter bolt on the other side. So we need to get this in. All right, I think it needs to go so many bolt holes. I think it goes like this. Started by hand. Okay. Then let me go retrieve the old bolt, which came from here because the right hand side already had the long bolt, or the driver's side. We need to not do the, words. Okay, so did I do this right? Is something going to line up? I think something's going to line up. Let's see. Yeah, that's gonna line up. All right. That's all done in by hand. Sorry you guys didn't see that. I couldn't get my hand. Move the camera around. There we go. Should look a little something like that. And just give you the heads up, all these bolts, when we go to tighten them in, they're going to be 89 inch-pounds again, so that's about 7.5 foot-pounds for those playing along at home. Alrighty, so that's done. I'm thinking the next thing we need to do is install the other guide on the other side, but let me go make sure. Said first time that I've ever done this. This is probably the most complicated non-engine out repair I have ever done. All right, a little trickier to set this one up, but we're gonna go with our driver's side, or our left-hand side guide. It's gonna be a BG413P. And this is the one that already came with, you already had a long bolt, because that bolt goes through the oil pump. So we're going to take this out, and we need, well, to make this work, how do we need to do this? Let's see here, do I even have this right? If I put that right there, does that even line up with anything? Looks like it would go like that. Yeah, I think that'll do it. Let me just make sure I don't have this thing backwards. That would be awkward, to say the least. Or upside down, you know, something like that. All right, I'm back. I have educated myself. So we're gonna start threading that through. This is gonna line up in here. Now, if you have keen eyes, you'll see the insert's missing. It just fell out. It's in the bag. So, grab the insert, grab the short bolt that is remaining, and the insert can only go one way. Yeah, I say this and it's just fighting me. There we go, a little something like that. There it goes, it hopped in. Okay. There we go. So that is how that guy goes, and we're going to tighten everything down to 89 inch-pounds. Okay guys, let's talk about timing chains. If you bought a Motorcraft kit, what you're going to see is there's going to be a single link. Now this is not Motorcraft, I'm just explaining what you should see. You'd see a link that's like a blue or something like that, a single, and then you'd see a double. The double is where you need to line up with your timing mark on your cam. The single is where you line up on this dot on the crank sprocket. Now, I have a Melling timing chain kit. And on the Melling kit, what they did was quite sneaky. They put like a stainless, bright stainless link, one. That's where your crank lineup is. And then they put two bright links. That's where your cam lineup is. But to make this even sneakier, you turn this chain over, it's not there. They only placed it on one side, which I think is somewhat stinky. So what I did is, as you can see, I took a paint pen basically and I marked our shiny links to make them just that much more visible, make it easier for me to see what needs to go where, and I can wipe this back off before I button everything up. Just wanted to let you guys know, if you have the Melling kit, that that's what they're gonna do. It's not gonna be colorized, which is easier to see. It's a pair of shiny links, right? One and then a shiny link here. So I'm gonna tag those, and then our next step is we're actually gonna put our first chain on. We're gonna put the driver's side chain on, and we're gonna see how close or how far off we are to having it right. Okay, so as you can see, we're close. We're maybe 2 teeth off, so it needs to go 2 teeth clockwise. But before you make that assumption, this is what you need to do. Take a look. The bottom of the chain needs to be as tight as it can be. So you can see there's still a little slack. It's not enough to move up a tooth. So that's pretty tight. I will double check that, but it's sitting right into its little groove at the bottom of the pump. The other thing you need to make sure of is when you bring your camera down, you need to make sure that your link, which it looks like I do have it in line, but I'm going to make absolutely sure that your one link down here is still in line with the dot, which should be at 6 o'clock. Got to make sure that's right, otherwise you're in trouble. So this is my stopping point. Gotta go be dad. But things are looking pretty good. We'll double check to make sure all of our alignment is good, then we'll adjust this. Once adjusted, then we're going to repeat the process on the passenger side. I will see you guys tomorrow. Okay guys, good morning. As you can see, I've gone ahead off camera and I did some more tinkering to get this aligned. You've seen how to do that. Loosen your cam lock ever so slightly, get this turned, lock it back up. So we're good here. The other part of this though is if you've got this part of it aligned, you have to make sure that you've pulled all the tension out of here to where you can't move up a link. And you see that's where we are right now. We can almost move up a link, but we can't. So what we're gonna do instead to finish pulling that tension out is, or making it tight, I should say, is we'll loosen the cam lock a hair again, and we're going to rotate this slightly counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, to the left, whatever term you want to use. And we'll get the rest of the slop out of that, because we want that tight. We want no slop there on this side. Now the top side, yeah, it's good and sloppy. We want it good and sloppy. That's how we want it. One other thing to check before you do all this to truly make sure that you got it right is you should go onto your truck or your SUV, whatever you're doing this on. Take a look at the underside and make sure that you are on your mark. So you see the dot, right? You're going to use that dot as your alignment for both chains. So right now, before we put on the passenger side chain, this is your last opportunity to make sure that you indeed put your shiny link if you're using a melling kit, or your color link if you're using a Motorcraft kit, up under the dot. And we're looking at a slight angle, but it is in alignment, as you can see. So we are good to go so far. We just need to pull that little bit of slop out of the bottom side of the chain and then lock it back down. And then we're good. And we can finish installing the timing components on the driver's side. And then we'll move to the passenger side. All right, guys, you can see I pulled it tight, but you can also see I'm having to get kind of rednecky here. This Chinese knockoff tool is just not getting it done. I mean, I saved money buying it, but I've had a ton of aggravation because of it. I strongly recommend you buy the OTC tool that you can see in Makuloco's video. It's like $100, but then you don't have to do silly stuff like this, like shimming stuff with a bazillion washers, and yeah, it's no good. It's no good at all. So with that done, we can go ahead and install our other guide arm and the actual tensioner itself. All right, we're gonna put our tensioner arm in, right? And this is our driver's. It is a BT411P. We know it's the driver's because it's got this little plastic bump right here. And that's gonna go, yeah, you guys can still see it. It's gonna go in around here, like that. So we want to make sure the chain is sitting inside the two rails of the white plastic part. Right? Now you'll see that there's going to be a little pocket up here for our tensioner. Okay, so tensioner installation. Driver's side is going to be the L. Passenger side is the R. If you don't have this recorded or video footage or whatever, if you look at like the little oil chambers on the back, they're two different shapes. And if you trace the witness marks here, you see how there's like an oil channel right there. And you look here, and you look how this is going to go in. That's how you know. Now, this pin, even though you probably have some kid level urge to pull this pin because it makes you think it's like a grenade, don't do that. This is holding the spring that keeps this, that would push this piston out. So the moment you pull this pin, that piston's going to go spoing, and then you're going to have a whole lot of fun trying to put that back in if you don't have this in position. So I'm going to go grab the needed bolts. We're going to push this back in position. We're going to put this in position, and then we're going to finger tight it. And then ultimate torque is going to be at 18 foot-pounds, and only then do we pull the pin. Oh, you know, I should probably get my step stool. I remember when I thought it was the funniest thing ever that you needed a step stool to work on a truck. Okay, so we need to get, yeah, that's not going to work. I need to back this out. We got to get the tensioner seated first before we try to get the bolts in. So we got to get, there's a little pocket here. We got to get that kind of in first. That our piston arm is buried in the pocket on this guide. We still have our pin engaged. We definitely have the L. So we'll take our other bolt. It should be pretty dang close. Just got to get it to line up. There it is. Okay, and I think these are 10 millimeter. So if you don't want to finger tight it, which, yeah, I'll probably grab my tool here in a second. But there, that's how that's going to go in. That's how that's going to look. I'm going to go ahead and get it snugged up and then tighten to 18 foot-pounds with my torque wrench. All right, before we do the deed here, let's make sure our piston is centered inside the guide. Let's make sure our chain is inside of the rails of this plastic that it's going to slide on. Looks like we are. We're on our pin. So all of this looks good. Okay, we can commit. We can pull the pin. Boom. All right, so now we are under tension. And we'll go ahead and we'll do the tightening at 18 foot-pounds. Okay. 1, 2, and we're going to check it again because you guys couldn't see anything because my arm was in the way. Okay. With that, we have timed the driver's cam. So we're going to repeat this process with the passenger chain and the passenger cam. Not going to film it because it's the exact same process, and I will bring you guys back for our final checklist before we say, yeah, we finished the timing job. Now we can actually put all this mess back together. Okay folks, if you've gotten this far, congratulations, the engine is now timed. The hardest part is over. Now it's putting back together all the stuff that you took apart. So we still have some tedious work ahead of us, but the scary stuff in theory is over. The, oops, I got it wrong, the engine's gonna blow itself up whenever I crank it, stuff is over. That being said, let's do a final check here, right? So check your sprocket timing mark, make sure it is between the two timing marks on the chain. Make sure that the tight side, which is the side that goes along this guide, is tight. The tensioned side should now be tight because you have your tensioner installed and you torqued it to 18 foot-pounds. Your chain should be sitting between the plastic rails on the tensioner guide. You should have the right tensioner on the passenger side. You should have the left tensioner on the driver's side. When we look down on our new crank sprocket, we should see, if we go under and look, we should see our timing mark pointing at 6 o'clock, pointing straight towards the oil pan. So if we look down here, I don't know how well the camera's picking up because the light's changing, but we should see our mark, our marked chain in line with our timing dot, and all of that should be pointing at 6 o'clock. And I can tell because I've been staring at it, but everything's in line down there, driver and passenger. And then moving over to the driver's side, we should be in our marks. Our tension side should be nice and tight, or our guide side here. And then our tension side should also be nice and tight at this point. Our tensioner should be torqued at 18 foot-pounds. We should be able to grab the chain and see it's within the rails of the tensioner guide. and that we're coming down and there's no slack, right? And you torqued all the other stuff to 89 inch-pounds, right? Right? With all that said and done, we can now remove our cam holding tools. We're going to want to get our rags out of the oil pan and prepare to put the front timing cover back on. But one other thing that you really don't want to forget. Do you remember this guy? This is your crankshaft position sensor tone ring. And it needs to go back on because otherwise the engine will not crank. And it is sighted. So yours may say front, it may not. Mine does not say front, but it does say rear. So if we're looking at the engine, it's going to go on like this in order for everything to line up. So that needs to be slid back on before you put your front cover back on. And you're also, at this point, if you have not done it, you need to clean all your gasket surfaces for the front timing cover. Also, remember, it does kind of dive down under the water pump. You're going to want to get that clean, right? Like I probably need to touch that spot up a little bit. We also are going to have to throw down some RTV at the corners where we meet the pan. Right there. Right there. You can't see it because I have rags in the way. But also where the block meets the head. Right there. And there. Where the block meets the head here. And there. So throw a blob of RTV there. Get the cover on. I'm going to go print out the torque spec for the various bolts, because if you remember, we've got some studs of different sizes. We have some regular bolts of different sizes. They all go in certain places. They probably all have different torque values, maybe even a torque sequence. But yeah, so kind of exciting. We're finally really putting the engine back together. And on that note, as I start putting things back together, since I filmed how they came apart, I'm not going to really film too much on putting it back together unless I find something that was kind of weird and, you know, might need a pro tip or something like that, because it speeds the process up for me a ton. And if you took it apart, you should be able to get it back together unless you broke something on the way out. One other thing that I'm going to do, just because I'm paranoid, is I am going to turn the crank by hand a full 2 rotations to get the full rotations of the cam. Because I had it backwards. It's 2 rotations of the crank to 1 rotation of the cam. So I had that in reverse. But I want to turn it and make sure that I don't hear anything funny, that nothing is sticking, nothing that would indicate that I screwed up and now we're off time and we have a valve smacking into a piston. Because I had it slip about 1 inch while I was fighting with it. The cam holders, I really recommend you buy the right tool. That was not the smartest of decisions I've made. Anywho's, I'm going to rotate it through and make sure it sounds good, feels good. And if I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and proceed with closing everything up. To be perfectly honest, at this point, if I've messed up valves on this thing, it's got 277,000 miles, it would be cheaper and easier at this point to just buy a new engine. Because I already spent about $500 in tools and parts to do this timing job, which these engines are $1,000, $1,500. You get a decent used one, so that made sense. But if I screwed up the valves and I got to do new heads, that's $700 there. So then the math just doesn't make sense anymore, except for a new engine. Anyway. All right, here's a highlight. Front crank seal. It needs to come out this way, and it needs to go in that way. What I wound up having to do is I have this from a different, I think it's like a bearing press kit or something, but took it, laid it flat like this, put a block of wood under it to support it, put some earplugs in because this was loud, got a hammer, and I kind of walked it in. If you've got a way to press it, that's better. My vise was not big enough to let me do that. I did not put any sort of sealant or anything on the actual seal. It's a press fit. But what I have read is you are supposed to put oil here. And then in order to accommodate for the harmonic balancer going back in, you should take a little RTV and glob it on the back of your crank bolt washer and then the head of the crank bolt itself. So we will be doing that. Other than that, this guy's ready to go. I have cleaned all the gasket surfaces. Even though the ones up here aren't going to matter for getting the case on, this one will matter. This is the one that butts up against the oil pan. So now that this seal has been replaced, I can go ahead and replace the gaskets that are on the inside. Those are pretty straightforward. They're formed, they just drop right in. You don't need to do any RTV for those, you just pop them in. And then we will finally be ready to put the front timing cover on. Another quick pro tip, when you're working with these gaskets that aren't a loop, right, it's just a straight piece, in this case it's formed, but you get the point, it's not tied together in a circle of some form. You want to start both ends and then work your way down a little bit, and then work your way down a little bit, and then kind of come and join in the middle. If you start at one end and you try to work your way all the way across, what happens is you get about 2/3 of the way, and then you've accidentally stretched the gasket as you're pressing it down, and the formed pieces don't line up anymore. So just a quick pro tip. Okay guys, I'm about to put the front timing cover on. Remember, get your tone ring on. And also you've got to put down globs of sealant where the cylinder heads meet the block here. Whoops, I forgot to do the other side. Glad I'm doing this. And then there. And the other side I forgot, down here. And then down at the pan as well before you put your cover on. You're going to use these two dowels for alignment. And then you need to hand thread everything in, and then there's a torque sequence and a torque value that I'll cover. All right, here's your bolt layout. It's pretty straightforward. Your smaller studs go basically on the top edges of the cylinder head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you get another stud here on the bottom. And then you get another stud here on the bottom. The one difference is there's a second stud on the bottom on this side. And then your two bigger studs go here at the bottom of the cover. Everything else is just different size regular bolts, and there's no way to really mix those up because their sizes are different. Now, with the gasket maker I used, which is the nicer stuff, the right stuff, how it reads is lay it on, put your cover on finger tight, which means no ugga-duggas, right? And then wait. It says 90 minutes. It says let dry for 1 hour, then tighten to torque specifications. So we're going to start that timer. If you're working with standard RTV, your rule of thumb is you still do this same basic thing. You lay your stuff, you put your cover on or whatever it is, you get it finger tight, you wait, half an hour, 45 minutes. It's going to depend based on the temperature and humidity in the environment in which you're working in. Until it kind of skins up, then you crank it down tight. And that's basically what this is asking us to do. But check that out, guys. Is that not cool or what? The front timing cover is back on. We got to wait an hour and then we can torque it. Don't forget there were 4 bolts you had to take out of the oil pan in the front. Those need to go back in. They do have their own torque sequence, and it's kind of a weird one. It's like a head bolt. You tighten it to a value, and then you give it a 90 degree turn afterward. So yeah, I don't think they're torque to yield. That would be very weird. But anyway, here we are. And the very last thing that we're going to need to do, and I can do this actually, but I want to wait until this is completely torqued down, is we need to put our valve covers back on, and that's going to necessitate some more sealant here and there on each side. Now there's no spots in the back, which is awesome, which means you can lay down your beads up here and then start dropping in your cover from the back, and then just bring it down so that way you don't smear your RTV around to the point where it's not doing what it needs to do. And after we have all of our covers back on and the engine is sealed back up, we just put everything back together. We put all of our pulleys back on, we put the crank back on, which I've done some mixed reading on what you need to do to make sure the crank doesn't leak from the woodruff key. And as a reminder, woodruff key is that little insert right there. That's kind of the 11 o'clock right now. I've read a couple different things. You slather it down with RTV, or you can take the big old crank bolt, slather the inside of the washer with RTV, like in here, and then slather your bolt head with RTV, and then that'll keep it from leaking. Not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, but it is a thing, because I've done a timing job before on a Ford Ranger. It was an old Vulcan engine, but I did wind up with a small oil leak from the front timing seal because I had the harmonic balancer off, and when I put it back on, I didn't put RTV back in there. So I always had a small leak right there. Nothing crazy, nothing that's going to kill you, but you know, these 5.4s, particularly the early ones, they already have built-in oil leaks out of the head gaskets, right? They all leak from the passenger corner. It's what they do. It's a feature, not a bug. So, you know, try not to introduce more oil leaks. Anyway, I guess while we're waiting around, I will take care of this guy, because he's all jacked up, and that needs to be fixed because that goes to the oil pressure switch and tighten down, and that'll probably be it for me today. I got stuff and things I got to do, but hopefully tomorrow we can do the thing. We can get this guy buttoned up, put everything back up, and actually test. All right, very quickly guys, so you don't have to go dig this up. Take a look. Fasteners 1 through 5 are at 18 foot-pounds. Fasteners 6 through 7 are 35 foot-pounds, and 8 through 15 are 35 foot-pounds. They separated 6 and 7 because they have a different socket size. Those are 22 millimeters. So if you take a look, 1 through 5 are your tiny guys. 1, and you should do them in this order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 6 and 7 are your big nutted studs that go at the bottom. Those are your 22s. And then you just start working the pairs. Go back down to a 13 millimeter. That's what our initial ones were. So 8 and 9 are going to be a 13. And then 10 is a 13. And then we have another stud here at 11. That's an 18 millimeter. Okay. And then 12 and 13 are going to be 18 millimeter studs. And then 14 and 15 are going to be 18 millimeter studs. Also, remember I was talking about the oil pump or the oil pan bolts? These are right here. Okay, so you're supposed to tighten these to 15 foot-pounds and then turn an additional 90 degrees. And it's not listed here in the picture, but they do an in-out order. It's not just straight across. So if you imagine that you had let's say four bolts in a row, it wants you to do that one, then this one, then that one, then this one. So you can try to bring it in evenly. But again, for those oil pan bolts, it is 15 foot-pounds and then an additional 90-degree turn. I'm going to take care of that, and then I am done for the day. But I am pleased as pie. We finally have the front back on the engine. It should be right. And tomorrow, when I have more time, I can finally reinstall the valve covers. Because remember those two stud bolts that I had to wreck to get out? Well, the replacements came in today. I was able to find them on eBay. They were not cheap, but I found them. So I can drop in those valve covers, and then once that's done, the engine is sealed back up, and we just got to put everything else back together. But engine sealed up, and I don't have to come out here and constantly spray compressed air to get junk out and vacuum and try to keep, you know, these oil galleys clear. So another quick pro tip for you: if most or some of your bolts came out of the gasket, which they're going to have to if you're putting new gaskets on the valve cover, it can be kind of fiddly to get them back inside the gasket so they'll retain. And what I have found is you can just insert and then use a small flathead, push the bolt all the way to one side, work that side, get it in, push it the other way, work the other side, pushing it in with the screwdriver, and then you're good to go. That seems to be a very consistent method for me for getting these in. And one other thing I noticed is, at least with these Felpros, you can force it in, but it's going to kind of pop it back out. So we need to be careful when we actually seat the valve cover. And what I have done, or what I am going to do, is right where you see this triangle about the middle of the back, I'm putting a glob of sealant, RTV, to force this to stay in, because what I had happening on my other valve cover, it was doing that. And I was concerned that when we went to put it in, particularly because it's in the back and we can't see, that this would get compressed wrong and it would leak. But if you force it to at least kind of float in this channel when we go to put it in, that should help a lot. Wanted to show you guys something real quick as I prepare to put the harmonic balancer and the crank pulley back on. See that? That's the Woodruff keyway. This is RTV. So that does confirm that probably what they did is they put a blob of RTV probably right there, and then tighten the crank bolt after everything was pressed on, and that's how they kept oil from leaking from there. So what I'm going to do is clean this all up, get it nice and tight, put the crank pulley back on. Now you're supposed to use a presser tool. What you can also do is use the crank bolt itself. But if you use the crank bolt, make sure it's the same principles as when you pulled it. Lube up the bolt and go slow. You're putting a lot of pressure on those threads. So go slow, lube it up, make sure you have it right and clean and good, and you should be able to press it on successfully. So I'm going to do that, but then I'm going to back the crank bolt back out, which might be a little interesting, but I'm going to do that. And then I'll put in my RTV, and then I'll do final insertion of the crank bolt. All right, updates. As you can see, the passenger side valve cover is done. As a reminder, you had to put sealant up front. I showed that in a previous segment. And again, I'm using the right stuff, which means you get it finger tight, wait an hour, and then bring it down to torque. Torque in this case really is elbow torque, because you're going to have a couple of bolts that are going to be really difficult to Well, not possible to get a torque wrench on. It's supposed to be 10 foot-pounds, thereabouts. And there is a pattern inside to outside, basically, so try to do that. I had a new PCV valve, so I threw that in there. Remember, we got to put our evap stuff back on. That's up there. You got a heater core line to put back. You have all the coils and injectors on this side that need to go back. You have vacuum lines that need to be hooked back up there, and then the other end of it comes in over here. Working your way down here, you have the AC clutch connector that needs to go back in. You have the high pressure cutoff switch for the AC, needs to go in there. I don't have it in yet because I got to figure out how to run it, but the crank position sensor is going to run under the compressor and then come over and hit the crank position sensor, which is around here somewhere. In fact, I think it's right there. Yeah, and then the connector sticks out right there, right behind the AC pulley. Meanwhile, up here on this side, you've got the rest of the alternator whip, so that's got to go back on. And I just finished torquing down, doing final torque on the driver's side valve cover. And again, this is a word to the wise. In case you didn't keep up with what's supposed to be a stud and what's supposed to be a regular bolt, and you just kind of put them in there, lay your cover in with no sealant down, so you get an idea if you've got something in the wrong place to where you're not going to be able to tighten it up. That almost got me over there. I had some studs where the case is, the evap case, and fortunately I was able to use a flexi wrench to get in there and get it tight, so I got lucky. On this side, remember, we have to put the fuel rail back on. That's going to be some 8mm bolts that are going to go in up there. Make sure you firmly reseat all your fuel injectors. Spray a little looby-doob so they don't go in there dry, so they'll actually seat properly. Reconnect coils, reconnect injectors. Got a cam position sensor here. Interestingly enough, there's only one cam position sensor. There is no cam position sensor over here. Then need to connect the big side of this harness leg back in over here. And that'll be it for up top, except for radiator lines, which you want to save for last. And I also put the crank back in. I was able to use the crank bolt. I had to first take a block of wood and run it across the hole where the crank bolt is, and gently, and I mean gently, tap with a hammer after I'd gotten the crank pulley lined up on the woodruff key to scooch it in just enough so the bolt would bite, and I could use the bolt to pull it in the rest of the way. And then I took, like I said, I took it out, I globbed it down with RTV, and I spun it back in and let that be. So that should be good to go. We're getting a lot closer than you think. The stuff up here goes pretty fast. Probably the longest, slowest thing you're gonna have to fight with down here is putting power steering pump back on, and then putting the fan and fan shroud back in. It'll probably be easier in this one. It was a pain in the butt in my van, but everything's jammed together in a van. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to finish it tonight. We're definitely going to be done tomorrow. We do want to leave the crank position sensor down there unplugged for now, because if you completely followed my video and you change the oil pump, we need to prime that pump. Which means we need to crank it knowing that it's not going to start. And as an additional safety precaution, we're going to come over here, we're going to pull the fuel pump relay out of the PDU. And that will make double sure that it cannot crank. Well, it can crank, but it can't start. because it's not going to know. Without the crank position sensor, it doesn't know what the timing is, so it can't fire. And then without a fuel relay, the fuel pump never receives the command to pump fuel. So no fuel gets to the engine, can't crank. And if it's like me and it's taking you a week to do this, you shouldn't have to worry about there being any fuel pressurized up in here. Anyway, let's keep chewing on it. Close, guys. We are really, really close. A couple of other small things that are easy to miss. I had taken out this little tiny support bolt for the oil dipstick, and got to put that back in. That's an 8mm. Another one that's really easy to miss is the connector for your, if I can find it here, it's actually for the oil pressure switch. And there it is. No, wait. Yeah, there it is right there. It's very easy to miss. I actually had to do a repair on mine, but don't forget to plug that back in. Make sure that when you do plug that one in, the way that it's routed up is to make sure there's actually a zip tie on that water neck down there. And the reason why there's a zip tie is to keep this from touching the exhaust manifold. So if you don't re-zip tie it, you need to run it in such a way that it cannot touch the manifold. And I just ran it a different way because it's longer now because of the repair that I had to do. So it'll go nowhere near the manifold. Should be fine. So if you're following along with me and you've done everything that I've done at this time, everything on the passenger side of the engine should be done. So you can put the idler back on, you can put the tensioner back on, you can put the water pump pulley back on. You know, make sure your alternator's reconnected, take care of that stuff I just talked to you about. Get this guy back in his bracket over there. Make sure that guy is back in on his stud and locked in with his nut. And you should be leaving a hole here because the last big thing we got to do is get the power steering pump back in. I've been avoiding that because that involves crawling around on the back, and that gets me particularly filthy. But after we get that done, we install this other idler. We can then put the belt back on. Well, yeah, we can do that. And then we need to put the shroud and the fan back on. We've got to reconnect a couple of coolant lines along the way. We need to reinstall the coolant bottle. And then we are ready to go. Oh, yeah, and I mentioned this earlier. I broke this. This is a EMI filter. It's kind of funny, actually. I pulled the part number off the one that was I didn't break, this guy. And I found this guy. And it said up, down, left, and right. It was not compatible with this truck, and it clicked right in. Fits fine. Just make sure that when you put this back on, that you route it in such a way that it stays clear of your idler. See, here's where the idler is, where this depression is. So if you swung it down, the wire could have gotten in the way, and by extension gotten in the way of the belt. So keep an eye on stuff like that. By the way, your thermostat's in here. If you have an earlier 5.4 Triton, before they made it so the bolts, you have to take out the bolts from the underside to actually get your thermostat out. So if you need to do your thermostat, go ahead and do your thermostat. It's very easy. 2 bolts. You'll need to do a little bit of gasket scraping, do a fresh gasket, a little RTV. It'd be fine. Or conversely, you wait for a rainy day because this is really easy to get to. You can get to it without ripping the engine apart. You'll have to take the air intake off, and that's it. All right, well, my time is up for today. Got to go make dinner for the kids. We're almost there, guys. Another 2 hours tops. We'll finally get to see this thing come back to life. preferably come back to life and run for longer than 2 seconds because we got the timing job right. Good morning, everyone. So we're getting real close. As you can see, the belt's back on. You turn the tensioner to the right. If you have an AC, you turn it to the left if you don't. Something that threw me off is my 97 van that has this engine. It has an idler right here. And I thought I needed to put an idler there. Well, surprise, surprise. This one doesn't use an idler. So somewhere between 97 and 2001, they said, you know what? We don't need that second idler. We're good. So yeah. Power steering pump is back in, 3 bolts, 10 millimeter. You can get, you got this hose needs to be disconnected and you can get access. You can get 2 of them from the top, 1 you have to get from the bottom. You can use, you got to use a short 10 millimeter in 2 cases, a long 10 millimeter in the other. Make sure you get your hose reconnected, make sure you get your power steering hose reconnected. Get those clamps back where they need to be. Crank position sensor. So there it is. I made sure I zip tied it to the high pressure AC line, which in retrospect may not have been the best of ideas. I mean, it gets hot, but it doesn't get crazy hot. Not hot enough to cause meltiness. Remember, we need to leave it disconnected so we can prime our oil pump for the moment. You'll just have to crawl under there real quick when everything's ready and just connect it. We are ready for shroud and fan. Remember, with shroud and fan has to go in shroud, then shroud is lowered into engine bay. And then you kind of just have to set the shroud to the side. Spin the fan back on. It is regular thread, so spin it to the right clockwise. You get it started. And then you're going to need a 36 millimeter wrench to get it tight. And it'll be useful to have the belt on because that puts the water pump pulley under tension so that you can actually get a little snug on it versus it free spinning, which is what would happen if you did not have the belt on. And after that, we got a few more bolts. We got to put our degas bottle back together, but then, and our air intake, because I don't like running it without a filter. That's it. Like, we're ready. I just realized that clamp is extremely crispy. Well, I ain't touching it today. So let's get to it. So one thing I wanted to point out real quick, I just caught this, is I had an open connector here. I thought that was weird. Turns out the wire comes up from under the intake right here by the alternator. And it goes into, you can't see it, there's a sensor right there. I'm plugged into, it might be like a cylinder head temperature sensor or something like that. Don't miss that one. It's right here. As you can see, everything else is in, fans in, shrouds in, degas bottle is reconnected and all that jazz. We're just down to the air intake and the MAF. Put that back together. And we are, well, I got to reconnect the battery. That's the last thing I'm going to do. And then we can fill with coolant, in my case, fill with oil, disconnect fuel relay. Then we crank and see if I did this right. See if the engine destroys itself or if we get oil pressure. All right, this is your PDU. It's where your fuses are for your engine bay. Just pull this tab here to open it. And I looked up online a quick guide. This big fuse here, this 20 amp, this is your fuel pump. So we're gonna get in here real quick and give it a yoink. Okay, put this in a safe place because these maxi fuses, you can't always go pick them right up at the auto parts store if you lose one. Okay, so now the fuel pump should not pump. Make double sure that your crank position sensor is not in. It's right there. I'm actually going to make it dangle down to make sure it can't get caught in the belt. The last thing I need to do is connect my battery, and then we'll attempt to crank because I put coolant in. And I know there's an air bubble and this level is going to go down once it warms up and the thermostat opens. Oil level's probably going to go down a bit as oil gets pulled in the pickup tube and the pump gets primed. And power steering level is going to have to be topped off because there's probably an air bubble with the pump. But fluid levels are high enough to start, so we're going to do it. All right, keep your eye on the oil pressure gauge, which is here. We want to crank until we see pressure, and then we want to crank like another 5 seconds or so after that. Here we go. Come on, baby. Come on. We are not making pressure. And I'm not liking that vibration. Okay, so one of two things have happened here. Either I've got the wrong connector on the... Oh, hang on. Either I have the wrong connector on the sensor. I don't have the sensor in far enough, which I don't think is the case. Or I did something wrong when I reinstalled the pump. So one thing that we could do to see if it is that the sensor, the oil pressure switch has gone bad, or I don't have it wired up right, is we could take a borescope or something and look around inside of a valve cover and see if oil has made it to the top end or not. But not great, not great. I'm gonna ponder what to do here, and then I'll get back with you, because under no circumstance should we attempt to fire without having some way of knowing that we're building oil pressure. Hi guys, some updates. So I checked my pigtail to make sure that my wiring was still good. So here's the pigtail. What you do, take a pin, stick it in the middle contact, and then like run a test lead from there to a ground somewhere. I clipped it to this bolt here. And if you do that and you roll the key to the on or the start position, you should see the dummy gauge on the instrument cluster go up to normal. Okay, so if you see that, your wiring's okay. So I did that, the wiring's okay. Next thing I did is I pulled out the oil switch. And sure enough, after pulling it out, there is no oil fell out. So no oil had made it to the pressure switch. So I also went, and Melling for their pump recommends a full 30-second crank to wait to see pressure. I did a 30-second crank. Nothing. So thinking about it, that leaves us with one of two possibilities, really. Number one is I messed up on the pickup tube O-ring, and it is leaking horrifically, and because it is, the pump can't prime. That's a possibility. I feel pretty comfortable I didn't screw it up that bad, because the way that connection works is if you have the pump in position, it just fits right in. You don't have to fight with it at all. And I didn't, and I also didn't tighten one side up and then leave the other slack, which can cost up the pinch and not center. So that leaves the second question, which is, well, maybe it just needs a little more oomph to prime. So I did some research. And sure enough, yeah, there are guys out there that have installed either the Melling standard volume pump or the high volume pump on their 2-valve or 3-valve Triton 5.4s. They do the cranking, nothing happens, they're panicking, and turns out sometimes it just doesn't prime. So I found a video from a guy, and I'm gonna link it in the description. He doesn't claim to be a content creator, but we need to send him lots of love, because without this video, I would have started tearing back into this thing already. And basically what he says is you need to give it a little more pressure. So what we're gonna do is, I actually don't need this oil pressure gauge. I've already verified I'm not getting pressure, but we're gonna take a pump sprayer, or just something that you can put pressure on. We're gonna modify it so that we can screw it in where the oil pressure switch goes. And then we're just gonna pump oil up to the oil pressure switch until the son of a gun's primed. So we're gonna pump it till she spews something. And there you go. But in order to do that, you need to have an oil filter installed that does not have an anti-drainback valve. And the way you can tell if something has an anti-drainback valve is that when you are, see, this is the filter I'd put on. If this was a dry, empty filter, you can put your mouth on the center and blow. And if you get a ton of pressure, your cheeks look like a chipmunk and you can't move air, it has a valve. It's essentially a check valve. It has a valve. That filter's not going to work. But if you can blow air consistently through the middle and feel it coming out around one of those 6 side holes, it does not have the drain back valve. And you can use this because we're going to have to force oil up and through the filter in reverse. So that means you can't have a check valve there. So to that point, I went out and I purchased a MicroGuard MGL 51372. I checked it in the store. It does not have the drain back valve, which is nice. And we should be able to pump it through. I've already installed it on the filter or on the truck, but I was able to blow, and I could take my finger and put it over one of the side holes and felt the air change as I plugged it and released it. So this should work. And it turns out that the regular Wix filter, same way. I don't think it has one, but the Wix XP, which is what this is, it does have a drain back valve. You try to blow through it and you just wind up chipmunking. It's like trying to blow into a balloon. It's a pain in the butt. So all the blabbering out of the way, we are going to modify that to go into there, and then we're going to pump oil, and hopefully that'll get us our prime. All right, guys, I have a remote start switch hooked up. This is hooked in where the oil pressure switch goes, and check this out. We have oil pressure. We have good oil pressure. 85 PSI on crank. All right, guys, check this out. Yeah. We got all the pressures. All right, first official crank. Here we go. Yeah, that's fuel getting pumped back up. Oh, that sounds beautiful. Awesome. No top end noise. Engine has not blown itself up yet. No lifter chatter. Oh. Oh. So good. I think I might need a cigarette. Oh. All right. So we'll let it run another couple seconds. We're going to turn it off. We're going to double check the oil level. Make sure that we're good. I think we're going to be fine because I had to backfill it, right? I had to back pump it, but yes. All right, oil level is slightly over full because I kind of pumped half a gallon in there and then peed a bunch out, but I'm fine with that because it's a 5.4 and it has the head gasket leak out of the corner. So it'll, self-adjust. So I'm not worried about it. And with that, guys, we have a successful repair. So this video was all about doing a timing job with oil pump replacement on my 2001 Ford F-250 named Miss Mildew with the 5.4 liter 2-valve, that's important for this job, Triton V8 engine. If you found this video interesting, if you found it entertaining, if you just liked it, please consider sharing, and subscribing, as that does help to grow this channel and allow me to bring you more content like this. Please also leave a comment. I like to read them, I like to reply to them, and I do like to learn from them. And lastly, guys, as you see multiple times in this video, I make the mistakes and I put them on film so that you don't have to. I'll catch you guys next episode.